All right, good evening. And I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Boulder Valley Board of Education for Tuesday, May 28th, 2019. Laura, would you please call the roll?
Benford. Here. Fuqua. Here. Garcia. Here. Gebhardt. Here. Marquis.
Here.
Myers. Here. Sargent.
Here.
All right, please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, good evening, and thank you for joining us after school has ended. I'd like to remind everybody that the mission of the Boulder Valley School District is to create challenging, meaningful, and engaging learning opportunities so that all children thrive and are prepared for successful, civically engaged lives. So, as with every meeting, we'll start with the superintendent's report.
Good evening, Board President Marquis, members of the board. Our last meeting here in the Ed Center. I've only been here a year. Some of you have been here, for much more than that. Some of our folks in the audience, and so, as a reminder to the public, starting in June, our meetings this summer will be held in the Town Hall of Superior. Thank you to the folks over at Superior who are allowing us to use that. I want to thank everybody for a great school year. Last week was our last day of my first year here as superintendent. Can't thank our students, families, employees enough for a great year. I also want to thank the board for doing such a great job as part of a governance team and the leadership that you provide for this district. I think we've had a really successful year. I was able to attend 9 overall graduations over the past week and a half, and I'm really proud of the class of 2019, and just hearing the student speakers who were so inspiring, just to be able to shake all of those hands. I think I got to 2,200, and then lost track. But just really, really amazing, and want to encourage all of our recent graduates to go out, find out what makes you happy, live your best life, and take the lessons that you learned from your teachers and your schools and your community with you as you go on and make the world a great place to be. Finally, just excited, board, that tonight we'll be introducing the work that our teams have been working on regarding our strategic initiatives. I'm really proud of how collaborative of a process that it's been for us. Very excited. You'll be hearing from some of the team today as they share with you some of the big ideas that will be going into the strategic plan. And I want to just thank everybody who's dedicated so much time to this. We've been working on this since January, and really excited about the conditions that many of these initiatives will create and allow us to put students first and focus on student outcomes. And as I shared with you, this plan is focused on students. And so I know we've got a long meeting tonight, so I will just leave my comments there. Thank you.
Any questions or comments for Dr. Anderson, board members? Okay, hearing none, we'll proceed to our next item on our agenda, which is public hearing and public participation. The board recognizes the value of public comment on issues related to the operation of the schools. To ensure that our meeting is conducted in an orderly manner, we ask that persons who address the board confine your comments to matters that are germane to the business of the school district. Speakers on agenda items will be heard first, followed by those to non-agenda items. This evening we only have non-agenda items. Limit your presentation to 2 minutes. If we go over the first hour, public comment will continue at the end of the meeting. That won't be the case. And also, we have some non-English speakers this evening, and so we're adding extra time for the translation so that we can get the same benefit of the 2 minutes for our other speakers. And then we'd like to recognize that students often attend or view our meetings. Speakers' remarks, therefore, should be suitable for an audience that includes kindergarten through 12th grade students. The board president may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement that is unrelated to the business of the district or inappropriate for K through 12 students. There is a lighting system on the podium, starting at green when your 2 minutes starts, turning to yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining, and turning to red at the end. When the light turns red, please wrap up your comments so that the board can hear from a maximum number of speakers. And again, you can always send an email if you didn't get to complete your thoughts, and we read all of our email. So All right, so with that, our first speaker this evening is Antonia Flores. Please come in. I don't, no, it's right in front of her. Yeah.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Antonia Flores. Tengo dos niños, uno de 6 años que asiste a la escuela bilingüe Pioneer. Apenas tengo un año de haberme movido a este estado y antes de venir aquí, mi niño estuvo en varias escuelas diferentes de otros estados y por lo que me he dado cuenta es que Pioneer es una de las mejores escuelas que he conocido y quisiera remarcarlo empezando por el director que hace un muy buen trabajo, ya que siempre se deja ver con una actitud positiva y una gran atención hacia las necesidades de los padres y siempre dispuesto a escuchar nuestra opinión. Creo que en una buena escuela viene de una buena dirección y de unos buenos maestros que les guste su trabajo y tengan siempre una actitud positiva para que así también el demás personal y los padres mantengan una buena postura y buenas relaciones entre sí y así formar buenos alumnos. Estamos de acuerdo que todos los padres queremos que a nuestros hijos les guste ir a la escuela, se sientan cómodos, no se sientan intimidados, ya sea por los maestros o por otros compañeros y que tengan una buena educación. Yo formo parte del Paso Voz y somos un grupo de padres latinos que buscamos el cambio y el cambio bueno en las escuelas y en nuestra comunidad. Les cedo la palabra a mis compañeras que tienen algunas preocupaciones que compartir y muchas gracias por su atención.
Muchas gracias. So her name is Antonia Flores, and she has 2 children. One of them is 6 years old, and he's at Pioneer Bilingual School. She's just had about a year that she moved here from another state, and before coming here, her son was in several schools, different schools in different states. And that's why I've noticed that at Pioneer, it's one of the best schools that I've gotten to know. And I'd like to note this because from the beginning, because the principal does a very good job, and he's always allowing to be seen. He's always seen among in the school, and he has a good positive attitude and places great attention on the needs of the parents, and he's always ready to listen to our opinions. I think that a good school is born from good administrators and good teachers who like their job, and they always have a positive attitude so that also the rest of the personnel and the parents can have a good, be in a good place and have good relationship between each other, and also that way you form good students. So we are in agreement that all parents want our children to like to go to school and to feel comfortable and not to feel intimidated by the teachers or by other classmates, and for them to have a good education. I'm part of the committee El Paso Voz, and we're a group of parents, Latin parents, that are seeking changes and good changes in our schools and our community. And I'd like to give some of my friends a chance to speak now about their concerns so that they can share also. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So our next speaker is Maria Guadalupe Cardosa.
Sí. Hola, mi nombre es María Guadalupe Cardosa. Tengo niños en la escuela Bursch Elementary, Farside Elementary, Luzvio Middle School y Centauros. Más que nada, me gustaría compartir lo que hemos observado en las escuelas del distrito cuando vamos. Las personas que nos interpretan no están capacitadas y un ejemplo es en Luzvio Middle School, en la noche de conferencias no hay suficientes traductores y los que hay no interpretan lo que uno dice en las juntas individuales. Incluso nos hacen caras y dan opciones personal. No siento esa cordialidad y aún yo no puedo hablar bien inglés, lo puedo entender y sé cuando alguien no dice todo lo que está traduciendo. Incluso las secretarias tampoco son cordiales cuando vamos y nos dejan esperando o no nos atienden. Son cortantes y hay una gran diferencia de amabilidad de cuando atienden a un padre anglosajón y a un latino. Me pregunto qué debe de hacer, que no debe de tener equidad con todos. Sugiero y pido que se ponga más traductores en las conferencias, ya que el título 6 dice que no puede haber discriminación por una barrera de raza, color, origen, nación y la orden ejecutiva 13166 requiere que las agencias federales tengan servicios a esos que tienen conocimiento ilimitado del inglés. Pedimos empleo más de secretarias bilingües y se les den entrenamientos para que sean atentas y cordiales para sentirnos parte de la comunidad escolar. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Si quiere pararse aquí claro que segundito. Mil gracias. So she says, hi, my name is Maria Guadalupe Cardosa, and I've got children at Birch Elementary, Fireside Elementary, Louisville Middle School, and Centaurus. More than anything, I want to share with you what we've observed in the schools, the district schools when we go. The people that interpret are not, they don't have the ability to do so, as I can tell you as an example of Louisville Middle School. On conference night, there aren't enough interpreters, and the ones that are there are not interpreting what we say at these meetings, at the individual parent-teacher meetings. And what's more is they make faces at us, and they give their opinion, their personal opinion. I don't feel that that's being cordial, and even though I can't speak English that well, I can understand, and I also know when somebody is not saying everything, that what they're translating is not what is being said. Also, the secretaries aren't very cordial. They're not cordial with us when we go, and they leave us waiting, and they don't take care of us, and they're short with us. And there's a great difference of how kind they are when they treat an Anglo-Saxon parent as to when they treat a Latin parent. And I ask myself, shouldn't there be equity for all? So I request and I ask that we could have more interpreters at the conferences, and that because Title VI says that there cannot be discrimination due to a barrier of race, color, or national origin, and Executive Order 13166 requires that federal agencies have services for all of these, and they would understand that have limited understanding of English, so that the federal agencies would have services for those who have limited English understanding. We ask that you would employ more bilingual secretaries and to give them the training so that they can pay attention to us and be cordial with us, so that we can feel that we are part of the school community. Thank you.
Okay, excuse me. Damari Yanis.
Oh,
Okay, then our next speaker is Lisa O'Brien.
Hi, my name is Lisa O'Brien, and I am a third grade teacher at Whittier, and I have an abbreviated letter that I'll be sending to you, but I wanted to share it here with you today. Up until the past few weeks, Whittier International Elementary and Alicia Sanchez International Elementary shared a special bond. The international part of our name signifies that we have an International Baccalaureate Primary Years program, the only two schools in BVSD with this distinction. We at Whittier want to express our disappointment over the district decision to remove the IB program from Alicia Sanchez International Elementary. They are our sister school, and we feel a deep loss as a result of this decision. Whittier became an IB school in 2002. Since that time, IB has increased in popularity throughout Colorado and across the world. In Colorado, there are around 120 IB schools, approximately 50 of which are elementary schools. In Summit County, the entire district has taken on the IB program. This is the district from which the new principal of Sanchez, Joel Rivera, is coming. On May 15th, the Daily Camera published an article stating, district officials said Rivera has demonstrated expertise in improving outcomes for students, which he clearly did in the context of the IB program. Was this taken into consideration when the decision was made? The Daily Camera article further states the priority of Sanchez needs to be on the 4 main areas identified by the University of Virginia's Partnership for Leaders in Education program, which are culture and climate, instructional best practices, leadership development, and professional development. It implies that the IB program would distract from this focus, yet these 4 areas are at the heart of the IB philosophy and required practices. We know IB-PYP is not a detriment or distraction to struggling students. Around 30% of Whittier's students receive free and reduced lunch, and around a quarter are English language learners. We see how this inquiry-based, action-focused curriculum engages students and helps them make connections to learning and to their lives. IB puts student agency at the heart of the IB-PYP, an opportunity that should not be taken away from the Sanchez community. The Daily Camera article also references the revolving door of principals and the lack of consistent leadership. When looking at root causes for low performance on state tests, among other challenges, this seems more worthy of consideration rather than removal of a world-class program.
Okay.
We know many of the Sanchez principals were dedicated and of high quality, but the turnover must have presented challenges. In fact, in our collaborative experience, one of the main sources of consistency over the last few years was the IB-PYP program.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your consideration and listening.
Okay, we next have Sarah King, who was given an additional 2 minutes from Brenda Dvorak.
Hi. Again, I'm Sarah King, and I'm on the board of the Period Pals Project, and this is my end of my 18th year as a BVSD parent. The Period Pals Project is a nonprofit organization that strives to ensure menstrual equity in schools. For over 3 years, we've partnered with BVSD middle and high schools to provide them with 1-year supply bags of menstrual products for students who cannot afford them. 1 in 5 students will miss school due to what is termed period poverty, meaning they cannot afford menstrual products. Last year, we lobbied BVSD to purchase and provide schools with menstrual products. Our understanding is that they are now available for school health offices to order. However, I just learned that the Boulder High School does not order or receive menstrual products from the district. Schools shouldn't have to special order these products. These should be part of the regular distribution of bathroom products such as toilet paper, soap, and paper towels. We've also recently learned that the pads supplied by the school district are more appropriate for postpartum mothers than for our active teenage students who often wear leggings and other snug-fitting pants. Thanks for addressing this need, and we hope the district will modify policy and process by ordering appropriate menstrual products for middle and high school students and distributing them on a regular basis to the schools. Now I'd like to address our most pressing concern. We requested earlier this school year that the district install free of charge menstrual product dispensers in school bathrooms. Currently, excuse me, if period products are available for students, they are, but for the rare exception, only available in the health rooms. This is not where the products are needed. I had hoped I would not have to belabor this point, but because we've been informed by Stephanie Farron, Director of Health Services, that the district has decided not to install such dispensers, I'll lay it out for you. Our research with students that partner with us shows that a student misses, on average, 10 minutes of classroom instruction to travel from the classroom to the bathroom, discover they need a tampon or pad, walk to the health room and back to the bathroom, take care of business, and then return to the classroom. If you think about it, this process would likely repeat several times in one school day, increasing the amount of lost instruction time. Passing periods are 5 minutes at Boulder High, so this process would not even be possible during a passing period without missing instruction time. This places an undue burden on menstruating students. No student is expected to go to the health room for toilet paper, soap, or paper towels. Why menstrual products? We're disappointed by the district's lapse in its commitment to equity and student success as exemplified by this decision. Ms. Farron, when she informed us of the district's decision, cited vandalism as a reason for not installing dispensers. This shows a blatant lack of respect for the students, and frankly, it's a cop-out. If the district would commit to the installation of free-of-charge dispensers, as many other school districts have, the Period Pals project would be happy to partner with the district to implement an installation campaign of sorts. This could include announcements to the students regarding why the district is installing dispensers to meet the needs of all their students. It could include discussion of respect for the students and why they should respect the dispensers. This campaign could even include an application of stickers on the dispensers advertising the availability of one-year menstrual supply bags for those who cannot afford tampons and pads. As an aside, time-delayed dispensers are available with a pre-programmed delay of several seconds between use to discourage abuse and over-dispensing. I urge you to treat your students as the young adults that they are, allow them autonomy over their bodies, and show them that BVSD walks the talk when it comes to equity and a commitment to success of all of its students. We welcome further discussion and a partnership with BVSD to remedy this situation. Thanks for all your time and your service to BVSD. And I have business cards for the Period Pals project for all the board members. Can I give them to you? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So that wraps up our public participation. Our next item is board communication. Would any board members like to start? Kitty?
So I had the opportunity not to go as many graduations as Dr. Anderson, but I got to go to 2. Unfortunately, I missed one because I was not feeling well. Anyway, the one I wanted to talk about was Boulder Prep. This is the first time I've ever attended their graduation, and it was so inspiring. Every single child, young adult, was introduced by a member of the faculty. They all had an opportunity to speak, and some of the things that they said about their own struggles and how they never thought that they would ever be up there with their cap and gown and graduating was just very touching and inspiring. And so I just want to say how much I appreciate the work that's going on at Boulder Prep.
All right. Richard?
I didn't attend 9. How many did you go? 12? 9? No, I did 5. I attended 5 graduations, and they were all great graduations, you know, from Centaurus, going down to Boulder Prep, going down to Justice High, New Vista, and Peak to Peak. Great ceremonies. But again, I want to make sure that I'm going to emphasize what I observe when I go to those particular graduations, particularly when kids are asked to stand up if they're summa cum laude, doing great with AP classes, you know, all that stuff. And when that happens, I'm usually a pretty good observer of the kids that are standing up and stuff like that. And my concern is that very few kids of color stand up when they're announced. And I would just make sure that I mentioned that last year, and I'll mention it again this year, and I'll probably mention it again next year. But we need to do something to make sure that our kids get the same opportunities or support them somehow so that we can see more kids of color stand up when these announcements are made. And I want to thank all the Latina parents that are here tonight. Muchas gracias por venir aquí esta noche. The concerns that you brought up as it relates to some of the issues that you brought up, I think that at some point we're going to be talking about those concerns, especially with the hiring of more bilingual staff and stuff like that. I think it's definitely needed, and I think it should be a priority as we what do you call it? When people leave, retire, whatever, you know, if we can start looking at hiring more bilingual personnel. And I heard something about the translation. I don't know what's going on with the translation, but I think we need to take a look at that too. Yeah.
All right. Kathy? Or to the left? Going right, left.
I don't have much to add. I too went to 5 graduations, and along with Richard was at the one at Justice, and it's similar to what happens at Boulder Prep. You know the hurdles and the obstacles that these students have overcome, and while they don't have a teacher introduce them, they do go out in the audience and give a rose to the person that supported them, and that's a very touching moment. But the part that's hard are the kids that are sitting on the stage that don't have anybody who's there to share the rose with. That's a little bit heartbreaking. What was very entertaining was T.J. Cole's sister doing a rap poem to the class that was really energizing, and it was very inspirational. So, and all the other graduations are all inspirational, and so it's just one of the best parts about being on the board is being able to watch these families and these children and young adults as they launch into their new lives. So I do have one quick question for you, Dr. Anderson, and it's based on the article that was in the paper yesterday about teacher insight, and I think we've had a conversation about that, and I think maybe we'll do some follow-up as to how we use teacher insight, if it's a screening tool or if it's just another piece of data. I think it's a hangover from an earlier administration, and so I would just like to get a little more information on how it's used and why it's used, and even if we still need it, or if there's better tools for screening as we go forward, and also an update on whether there's any paths for any of these teachers to stay in some of the preschool programs, and so I'll just send an RFI on that just to follow up on that. So,
Those are great questions, things that we'll be definitely looking into and we'll be getting back to the board on.
okay, and thank you to all the participants. Gracias por estar aquí. Yo sé que es muy difícil hablar en español a nosotros, pero siempre queremos oír o escuchar lo que quieren decir. Entonces, muchas gracias por estar aquí. And thank you to the other people who came and commented. I'm sure Rob will be following up on some of the concerns that were raised there. So thank you for coming and raising that to our attention. We really do appreciate public participation and really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy lives to come and share your concerns and solutions. So I think that's really important. So thank you.
All right, Donna.
I want to thank everybody for coming tonight as well and informing us, keeping us up to date, not only on the problems happening at Pioneer and the other schools with translation, period project, and the IB program. Thank you for informing us. It helps us. Also, I want to say that we had a budget committee meeting third quarter, and all is looking well, and I want to give a shout out to Bob Smart for being our community liaison and doing such a good job and keeping us he just has infinite wisdom on the budget. He makes my job of some of the oversight and the questions I would ask, he asked them way before me and with much more detail. Since we have an ending balance and some money left over, I think we could help with the period project and with some translators and with a lot of other things, needs in the community. I was only able to attend one graduation, but it was quite inspiring. Sat beside Elon Musk's girlfriend. But then I also got to hear one of our gals of color that was a graduate that got almost a standing ovation of her rap and her poem that she presented. She was phenomenal for anybody that was there at the Boulder High graduation. It was, were you there? Yeah. So that was just enlightening, and I always enjoy this time of year. I also attended the debates that Mr. Reed held at Monarch and got to sit in on 2 discussions where the kiddos had to, you flip a coin and you have to take the positive or negative view of the situation. And one was on should college athletes be paid. And I have to tell you the outcome on that one was they were so much like either watching Ben Shapiro or Steven Crowder or something like that. You watched it, and as one speaker would speak, I'd say, yes, you won. And then the other one would speak, and I would think, yes, you won. It was really hard to decide, but they decided, or the outcome on the college athletes being paid was, no, they shouldn't be, because that team had a little more their facts together. The other one was The U.S. shall require universal background checks for all gun sales and transfers of ownership. And that one was a definite yes. But they both had me, and they were great speakers. And I think what we're raising up in our school system here in Boulder Valley is just so fun to see. These juniors will be our seniors next year, and we'll be sitting at their graduation, listening to their speeches, and that's exciting. Thank you.
Sam?
Yeah, well, I would echo your appreciation for Bob Smart. We're so fortunate to have community members like Bob helping us out as we navigate complex issues. People bring their professional expertise to the district in many forms, and I'm very grateful. Also grateful to the parents who spoke tonight. Thank you for your advocacy. Please continue to express your concerns to the board. We do hear you, and we appreciate your being here tonight. Thanks also to Ms. O'Brien from Whittier. And to Sarah from the Period Project. Rob, what would be the best way to get an update on where we are on the issue of providing, a menstrual products to girls?
I can give you all an update on where we're at.
Okay, thank you. I'd appreciate that. I think the rest of the board would. And then congratulations to all the graduates. An amazing achievement. Congratulations also to the teachers, the staff, the parents, the family members who helped them get there. It's a happy time of year.
Shelley?
Yes. I also attended a couple of graduations, and I won't go into how great that is. It's the best part of my job anyway. I don't know how you all feel, but it's always so great to see them so happy and so bright-eyed about their futures, and really, really nice. But I did want to just follow up with what you said about the Monarch debates, because the thing that struck me so much about that, and this is I think the third year I've judged those, is that that's a regular class. That's not a debate class. And it's just a regular, English language class, I think. So I think that kind of training for kids in their regular classes, I think is a really good idea, and not just reserve it for the super duper debaters, because those kids are always going to do great in those situations. But this is just a good learning experience for every kid in high school. So I just encourage that as part of the curriculum in general. And if we have some sort of process where we share great ideas between schools, I think that's one that could be shared. So.
Can I just say a shout out to Mr. Reed, because he runs that class.
Just a quick shout out to New Vista. Rob and I were able to go to their 25th anniversary, and it was great to see how far the school has come, and to have Rona, the original principal there, kind of talk about the original vision and see how far it's come, and see the enthusiasm and the great teachers and the leadership now that's been there for now several years. And it was just great to see how much it's come along, and look forward to another 25 years. And also went to the CBOC meeting, and there's apropos to your comment, Sam, the volunteers on that committee, they remember numbers like 3 years ago, they'll say to poor Rob, so I remember this number being X and now it's Y. And there's no detail that goes unnoticed there. They take their job seriously, they work really hard. We got to get a tour of Fairview High School and the renovations there, and the good work that's been going on in the bond project. And so just a shout out to all the members on CBOC and to the staff that staffs them, because it's hard work. And we look forward to another summer of nonstop construction projects, and good luck to Rob, because I'm sure there will be glitches along the way, but it's been managed really well so far. So I just want to say thanks to CBOC.
All right. So let's move on to our next item, which is an information item, the Athletic Review Committee recommendations and implementation. So just a reminder, this is a board-appointed committee that we appointed, is that a year ago, Shelley? I think it was a year ago.
June of 2017.
Oh, see, 2 years ago.
2 years, yep.
That's why I asked.
And Shelley and Ginger Ramsey and Dave Callan have made every single meeting over those 2 years. So, good evening, members of the board and Dr. Anderson. We're here to give an update on the school progress based on the athletic surveys that they conducted last year, and to update you on their future plans. Just as a baseline reminder, in June of 2017, there was a board work session, which resulted in the board instructing us to gather a committee to look at the strengths and weaknesses of the athletic programming at the high school level. So in 2018-19, we started the work. Principals identified committee members who would support growth in the program for our athletes, to challenge the system and to represent their community, including a coach, an administrator, and a parent. Additionally, we put an application on the website and received 12 applications for at-large membership, and appointed 3 individuals from the community at large to join the committee. Last year, this time, we brought forth a report and an update on what we were going to work on during the 18-19 school year. And so without further ado, I'll turn it over to the schools and let them tell you the great work that they've been doing.
Can we go to the Boulder High slides? Oh, there you go. I was told the slides are not working properly, so I'm sorry.
Let's see. You can
All right.
side click.
Yeah, right here?
Yep.
That's what I was doing.
Okay, let me see if Patricia can forward them from in there.
Okay. You know, that's awesome. That's great. Dr. Anderson, board, and the Wizard of Oz, I appreciate the time this evening. Can I get the first slide with the Boulder High logo on that, please? Next one, please. Wizard. Thank you. I'm Eddie Hartnett, and I'm the athletic director at Boulder High School. Boulder High School is a member of CHASA, and we are a participant in the Front Range League, which means we have over 2,000 students that participate at that are students at Boulder High School. Student participation in athletics was 461 in the fall, 178 in the winter, and in the spring, 441. Again, we are primarily members of Front Range League, with a couple of the exceptions I'm going to speak to you this evening about. Next slide, Wiz. Strengths. Students feel comfortable balancing. These are some findings that came out of the athletic survey and that we were able to evaluate. The strengths were students feel comfortable in balancing academic and athletic needs. Coaches ensure the safety through supervision. And focus areas were to increase participation numbers and to improve the climate and the culture. Slide 4, please. Some of the things that we thought when we read about the league alignment changes or improving participation, when we reevaluated survey results, we were able to see some commonalities, some areas of focus that we need to focus in on. And we looked at league alignment because some of the feedback that we were receiving was feedback from obviously all of our sports, but the consistent feedback was from the sports that were really, really struggling in leagues. And we, like I said, we participate in the Front Range League primarily. 2 years ago, we participated entirely, basically, in the Front Range League. This past year, we looked at the league alignment. And in softball and football, we looked at changing our leagues. The result was evident. Participation numbers went up. For example, in softball alone, we went from 12 softball players to 24 softball players. We experienced success in wins and losses, and we were competitive in most games. We participated in the 4A Colorado 7 League. In football, we participated this year in the Metro 10 League, an idea that came out of Boulder High School to make CHASA work for the school rather than CHASA suggesting what league a school should be in. It was innovative, and it worked at Boulder High School. We now compete with schools that face similar challenges as Boulder High School does in football. We are now competitive in most games. And as far as participation numbers, one of the areas of focus, we've increased this year by 32 athletes alone on the football team. As far as the increase in the numbers of athletes and participation numbers over the past few years, in 2016-17, student athletes, we had a total of 1,007. In 2017-18, we had 1,045. In 18-19, we now have 1,080. As far as improving the climate and the culture, we wanted to create a partnership with the Anti-Defamation League. Every student that participated in athletics attended an ADL workshop that was created by the athletic department and the ADL. This affected competition days, and indeed, it affected so many practices. But you know what? It was worth every minute. It was so encouraging to see coaches participate and get behind the partnership that was created between the ADL and Boulder High School athletics. I'd like to share a couple of quotes from student athletes. The presentation provided the girls basketball team with the basis of communication and openness for an entire season. The softball team, a member of the softball team, said that it gave us a perspective and an awareness, and we were put into an uncomfortable situation. We were prepared. We also improved the climate and culture by hiring in-building coaches. 4 years ago, we had 2 staff members that were coaches in the building. We now have 14. And 6 of the 14 staff members are head coaches. Some of the celebrations include, you're doing great back there, Wizard. Joey Arola, state runner-up at the 106 pounds in wrestling. Max Cradle, our recent state champion in the 100 butterfly. He's an All-American. Dylan Rogers, well, Dylan took second place in the pole vault. Our 4x8 girls track team, top 10. Boys pole vault, again, Dylan Rogers, number 2. And in the past 4 years, last slide, please. In the past 4 years, Boulder High has had, each of the 4 years, a nationally ranked boys soccer team. Thank you for your time. And it's without hesitation that I'm very proud to present my former high school, Broomfield.
Yes, we do claim him as an alumni. It's hard to believe. Good evening. I'm Steve Shelton from Broomfield High School. I'm the athletic director and assistant principal there. I'll share some similar information. A lot of us have similar information in terms of our league alignment and things, but Broomfield High School has about 1,545 students. We also participate in the Front Range League. Because of our size, we also have about 3 of our programs that participate in 4A. So we compete mainly in the Northern League in those programs, wrestling, girls tennis, and football. You can see our participation numbers there as well for the season, and also for the male and female distribution is almost 50-50, so we're pretty close. We also compete, like I said, in the Front Range League. Next slide, please. When we began to look at our survey data and began to really try to question what the issues were for us, the glaring strengths for us appear to be, we see our coaches and our kids feel like there's a good balance between high expectations for our programs and how much we care for our kids, and that our athletes feel positive about their coaches and their relationship with their coaches. The 3 things I want to talk about today in terms of our focus areas start with communication. If you could go to the next slide, please. Our administration and our coaches really pushed each other this year to focus on creating a welcoming environment for our parents. We tried to start that off with our initial start of the season parent meetings and really focus on our tone in those meetings and how sensitive we are to how those kind of simple things can make a difference with parents in terms of them feeling comfortable and them feeling welcome in our meetings, and then addressing coaches if issues do arise. So we talked about changing the way we do those parent meetings and those coaches meetings to start the year to really focus on being welcoming to them. We also really tried to increase our communication with parents. If you're in the Broomfield community, you know Mrs. Ramsey sends weekly emails, usually on Sunday nights, sometimes on Monday mornings, with information about the week, and tries to, again, from her perspective, open those lines of communications. She allowed us in athletics, when things came up and needed to be communicated, to use that as an outlet as well. So we would add things to her Sunday and Monday meeting announcements to community members. And then one of the big focus areas for me personally was the idea of the one big frustration that I hear from athletic director all the time is the idea that parents feel like a conversation, a difficult conversation with a coach, ends up in there being consequences for their student, a repercussion for their student athlete. We hear that all the time, and I think really the only way to do that is to make sure our coaches are setting that tone, that they're open to the conversation, and both sides may hear things they don't want to hear, but when they leave the room, in the end, it's still about the kid, and we have to find a way around that conversation. Parents coming to me or parents going to the principal doesn't get us there. We have to address the issue with the coach because they're the one that's there every day at every practice for hours with those kids. That's where we can make the impact, and so we have to allow parents to feel comfortable with that. The second area I'd like to talk a little bit about is increasing focus on academics. I think when you have the level of success athletically that we do at Broomfield, they build a reputation that athletics is the focus, and we've moved too far away from the academic focus. But when I sit in our banquets, and I sat in our track banquet, and we have 140 student athletes out for track, which is a tremendous number for our size school, and 85% of our student athletes are academic all-state, which means they have a 4.0 or higher. I can just verify that our kids are doing fine academically. We have our soccer program for the last 10 years, both boys and girls soccer, as a team have been academic All-Americans, which means the varsity level program has a grade point average above a 4.0 for 10 years in our boys and girls soccer program. So we have a swim team and a cross-country team where 85% of our athletes are academic All-State. I mean, those are just impressive numbers. The proof is in the pudding. The success that we have athletically supports our students in their success academically as well. The one thing we did take a look at changing was that we have two things. We have a committee that we set up this year to look at how we're doing our academic celebrations, to figure out make sure we're honoring the academic celebrations as much, if not more, as we're honoring our athletic celebrations. And so we have a committee that put together and looked at all of our academic celebrations, and we're going to reevaluate this summer how we're going to change or alter those things if we feel like it's necessary to find different ways to honor those academics and those students. And then the other thing we did was we talked with our coaches, especially our programs that used to be, if you were a lower level athlete, the expectation was after your game you stayed and supported the varsity program. And we felt like a conversation with our coaches to allow those kids to go home and study and go home and prepare for tests and academic things was a bigger priority. So we talked coaches into allowing that to happen and get those kids home that needed to go home. And then our last situation that I think is important to talk about is our off-site programs feel a little less supported than our on-site programs. So when you have buildings that are in towns like ours where we're a little bit landlocked, it's hard not all of our buildings have pools in them. Our swim team swims off-site. We send our lacrosse players to play lacrosse. Our boys go to Monarch and our girls go to Fairview to play lacrosse. And our hockey players go to Monarch to play hockey or Centaurus to play hockey. And so while it can be difficult, wearing our Broomfield blue and seeing those gold and black Monarch lacrosse shirts in our hallways, we got to recognize those are still our kids. We have to find ways to honor them. So we have an increased focus on social media to try to get those programs. Obviously, we all follow each other, and if you don't, you should follow us on Twitter because all of us do a pretty good job of keeping our communities up to date on social media. We've worked with our student government programs to involve advertising for those outside groups in our building. Broomfield, part of our construction project was we have TVs all over our building that now have advertising of events and activities that kids can support. We started a student announcement group, so we have online announcements, which kids broadcast with a green screen behind them and do all kinds of fun stuff with their Friday announcements from their peers, which surprisingly enough, they tend to listen to a little more when it's their peers doing it than it is with us standing up there doing it. Can you go back one slide, please? Sorry, that one right there. Go forward one. There you go. I just want to talk about some of our celebrations. Like I talked, we're very proud at Broomfield of our academic success and our athletic success. We have multiple teams that are academic All-Americans. This last 2 years, we're back-to-back state championships in Palms. And this year we had an individual state wrestler that was a champion in Darren Green. We also had a tremendous end of our season in boys swimming. We had 6 state champions in boys swimming. We had a relay that won a state championship in a relay, which is a really fun thing as a team. Swimming's a unique animal because it's an individual sport, but those relays make it a team sport. So it was great to have a relay win a state championship, as well as an individual who won 2 races as a state champion as well. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Centaurus. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Anderson. My name is Emerald Murphy, and I'm the athletic director, assistant principal at Centaurus High School. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you this evening, and thank you to Randy Barber for his help with this slide presentation. Next. Centaurus High School is located in East County, and we are a 4A high school by the CHASA classifications. There are 1,300 students at Centaurus this year, and next year, I think our enrollment is pushing 1,420, so it is fast growing. You'll notice that the students participating in athletics on the left by breakdown of fall, winter, and spring with a total of 712. We do have a discrepancy in the number of male and female students who participate in athletics, but that is actually proportional to the number of students who attend Centaurus High School. We are a member of the Northern League. We have 19 sports programs, many student activities, including our marching band, theater, student council, and we have 36 different student-initiated clubs. The athletic survey findings for Centaurus High School, the strengths included, the athletes felt that they could balance academics and sports. Specifically, 90% of the survey takers felt that that was a true statement. The next bullet points out that participation in athletics is seen to be a positive experience for our students. 89% of our athletes agreed with that. And finally, spectators demonstrate really good sportsmanship at Centaurus High School. If you attend any of our events, they tend to be a very positive experience for all. There were 3 areas of concern that were highlighted from our survey findings. The first is that we needed to increase our communication among stakeholders. The administration sharing feedback with coaches was pointed out to be an important part of the survey. And finally, we did have low survey participation numbers. Next slide, please. The action items that came out of the survey included an increased messaging to parents and staff. So from my office, the communication that comes out of Centaurus Athletics is in both English and Spanish to the families, including reminders to take the survey, which was in both English and Spanish to our families. We include celebrations in our weekly newsletter to families in the Warrior Weekly that includes pictures and updates. I had a athletic roundtable this year, which were 3 opportunities for members of the community to come to Centaurus, meet with me, sit down, similar to Coffee with the Principal, but I couldn't take Dan Ryan's event, so I had to make it up and call it the Athletic Roundtable. So the topics this year included, what is CHASA and how do they help support Centaurus Athletics? What is educational athletics? And what is the role of the athletic director? So we had 3 of those. Additionally, we included a captain's council where I was able to meet with the captains for each sport each season and get to talk to them one-on-one. We had breakfast together. That was a positive experience. They got to share things that were going well and areas of improvement, including the wrestling team requesting a new mop. So sometimes it's very low-level details, but it was still important. And finally, we did a pilot where we had senior exit interviews, which was an opportunity for me to meet with our seniors as they were graduating to talk about their experiences one-on-one regarding athletics. Next slide, please. You're going to see here the celebrations at Centaurus. Success is our bond. This photo was taken at an assembly in our brand new gym. We had a $30 million construction bond project, and it took 20 months to complete. Some highlights of what was done to Centaurus include $300,000 in security upgrades, $1.5 million in our stadium renovation, as well as the gymnasium, the wrestling room, and the weight room. Smaller things that still are impactful are our small gym received brand new lighting, which we're very thankful for because it makes a huge difference, and the feedback from the community and the alumni has been very positive. Another success, next slide please. You'll see here our boys soccer team that they have been very successful these last couple of years, and it's a focus on educational-based athletics. At Centaurus, we say that the goal may be to win, but the purpose is to build students of character. So we develop coaching education that really supports that mission and provides learning opportunities on and off the field for the students, developing strong work ethic and preparing them for life beyond Centaurus. Next slide, please. Strong work ethic, including a photo here of Signing Day, National Signing Day, and we want to celebrate that students, of course, are able to balance academics and athletics. Another highlight, our boys basketball team made it to the Great 8 quarterfinals for the first time since 2006. Boys cross country won the 4A state championship. We were league champions in Palms. Winter Guard won the state championship, and Centaurus added JV hockey this year, which was fantastic. Next slide, please. Finally, you'll see the title is Team Building, and this is a photo of our girls tennis team taking a white bus to Steamboat Springs, Colorado for a weekend tournament. And we want to highlight at Centaurus that really 97% of all high school athletes experience, how do I say this, that their time in high school athletics is a terminal experience, meaning 97% of them will not go on to play any sort of organized sport after they graduate. So at Centaurus, we really want to focus on team building and the other positive accolades that go along with high school sports. So to finish up, we want to celebrate that our baseball team went to Arizona for the first time since 2010. Girls tennis shown here traveling to Steamboat Springs. And our girls basketball team spent their opening weekend in Colorado Springs doing a college visit, playing basketball, and attending the zoo, which was a highlight of their entire season, I think, too. So thank you guys for your time. And up next, we have Fairview High School.
Thank you, Emmy. Thank you, board members, Dr. Anderson, for giving us the opportunity to speak. Before I dive into my slides, I'm realizing a byproduct of this process that we commissioned 2 years ago, and it's the ideas that I'm hearing from the other athletic directors that they have implemented in their building, which is something that we could do in our building. And I don't know that we've openly talked about that as a positive, but I certainly think so. So, my name's Taryn Kelly. I'm the athletic director and assistant principal at Fairview. Fairview is a 5A school. We have a student enrollment over 2,100, and I think it's growing all the time. We have very active participation in athletics. You can see it by season and the gender breakdowns. We are also in the Front Range League in all sports. We took a hard look at the surveys that we received back from this process and tried to identify some specific strengths. There were individual things said about each of our programs that were very positive, but looking for themes throughout. Our students oftentimes feel extremely pressured academically, and they all felt, I shouldn't say they all, but there was a predominant feeling that they get support from their coaches towards their academics. We are educationally based athletics, and to have our coaches supporting our kids' successes in the classroom is one of the things that jumped out of our surveys. The second item that I saw repeatedly from different sports is about our veteran coaching staff. We have a lot of coaches that have been around for a long time at Fairview, and yet at the same time I've had tremendous turnover in some sports. And it's not always easiest to find coaches that are qualified, but I believe that our athletes and our parents feel that the coaching staffs that we do have at Fairview have the background necessary to do a good job of teaching that sport to their children. We identified 2 focus areas that I think we could work on this until we're blue in the face and maybe not achieve our goals as much as we'd like, but the first one involves coach communication with both the athletes and their community. A lot of the breakdowns that we have in the relationship between our community and our coaches happens due to lack of communication. It certainly was an area of emphasis moving forward. And like some of my other colleagues, the low participation. So next slide. Our next slide are action items. For coaching communication, as I wrapped up last year and I moved forward into this year, I really tried to emphasize to our coaches to establish some method of communicating, mass communication, to all the members of their team as well as their community through some type of group messaging. Some of my teachers who are, or coaches that are teachers will use Infinite Campus Messenger. Some of them use Google Classroom. Others use third-party vendors like TeamSnap. They are sending out constant communications. I asked them to have me join that group so that I can see what they're sending out so that I'm aware of the things that are going on, and that was a real positive. As we examine the next set of survey results, I anticipate seeing improvement in that area. Another area of communication, which actually came from an idea from our volleyball coach, they do a weekly newsletter. And so the focus of the newsletter is not only what's coming up, but it was a little bit of a celebration of the successes they had that week. And they incorporated some pictures and did neat little stories and usually had a little blurb about any of the fundraisers or financials that they were involved in. And I am asking some of my other coaches to try that, but they're not as technologically savvy. You mentioned Bob Smart. For those of you that aren't familiar, Coach Smart has been a coach at Fairview for 24 years, and because of overlap with boys and girls swim, he's actually coached 29 seasons for us. But I don't think there's any way he could do a newsletter. Love the man, but we hire these young coaches to take on some of that technology. Increased participation in surveys. As a whole group, we decided it's important to send them out right at the end of the season instead of waiting to the end of the year, and I think that had a big impact on us. Anytime I got in front of a group of parents, I wanted to let them know to anticipate that it was coming. So, sometimes it ends up in the junk mail, or sometimes they just think it's another communication, and I tried to emphasize how we're using the information, and that I would greatly appreciate their participation. Our fall numbers went up substantially, so I haven't looked as closely at our winter or our spring. Another thing I tried to do is send out a separate email that didn't come from the district, that came from my office, that said some of the same things. Please look for it, please do it, have your child do it. The feedback's valuable. I wanted to emphasize some of the rules so that they knew it is anonymous. The information is for the committee and for myself to help guide us to be better in athletics. So I'll move on to celebrations. So that first slide, our first celebration, we moved, when Centaurus picked up hockey, we moved girls lacrosse from Centaurus to Fairview. And there were a lot of people, especially out on the east side of the county and the adjacent counties even farther east, that weren't real happy. And it's tough to make everybody happy, but we did it. And the way we did it is we were so fortunate to land a coach. This wonderful young woman from Massachusetts moved to Colorado for work with her fiance. Happened to be an All-American, 4-time academic All-American and 2-time All-American. And she had an ability to connect with the kids, and those kids fell in love with the sport again. And in particular, we had one young lady who was a phenomenal athlete from Boulder High School participating on our program, and I met with her mother specifically, and she was considering not playing. She was going to give up on the sport. And instead, she came out, she gave it a try, she met the coach, and loved it again. In fact, that's her number 15. Very, very positive experience for our girls, not just at Fairview, but from across the county and some of our neighboring counties. They were super competitive this year. Their losses came to their only losses came to teams that made the Final Four. in the state tournament, and they lost in the playoffs to the eventual state champions. So super proud of our girls and our coaches. So next slide, please. I probably spent too much time talking about that. Girls swimming and diving, we won the state championship this year. It was our second state championship in 4 years. As I mentioned, my coach, Bob Smart, is a statistical wizard. He knows everything there is to know about swimming and times and All-American times, and he's a true scientist at the sport. He sent me some information. I wanted to share it with you. So this group of young ladies won the state tournament, and they scored the most points that any Fairview team has ever scored at the state tournament. And we've had tremendous success over the years, including another state championship just 4 years ago. But 9 of the young ladies on this team will be swimming in college on scholarships, either for academics or swimming, or for most of them, a combination of the two. We had 36 state qualifiers at Fairview this year, the most ever at Fairview. 11 events that we host in swimming, 7 of our school records were beaten this year by that program, which is amazing. We've never had anything like that before. And based on the National Interscholastic Swimming Coaches Association, 6 of our athletes are expected to be awarded All-American status, which is impressive. Not on the slides because it's happened since this was created. Our tennis team took 4th, including a number 1 singles taking 2nd place, number 2 singles taking 1st place. And I just want to celebrate track and field. We have a young lady, Marlena Prey, she was a state champion in the 800 meter, her 2nd year in a row. And this year she decided to double that up, and she also won in the 1600 meter. Last slide. We've had a real difficult year at Fairview. Just lost a kid, lost a teacher, just a lot of difficulties. And I had a group of athletes from our school that got together and started a Snapchat group. And they made sure that they had members of that Snapchat group that have access to posting from multiple different sports, both boys and girls. And they challenged each one of those leaders to make sure they hit all of the sports. And their whole goal was to spread positivity for each other and to build camaraderie and to give people an opportunity to feel the successes that they're experiencing. It is maybe the single greatest thing we did this year, coming together, that unity. So as I wrap up my tenure as athletic director and pass the torch to the next guy, I hope that a lot of these things that you hear tonight I can share with him, and he can continue to carry on. So next presenting will be from Monarch High School. Unfortunately, Eric is not here tonight. He has had a family issue that he's dealing with. Our thoughts are with him. Principal Neil Anderson. Well, he's
President. That's all right. I'm glad I'm not president. Happy to be principal at Monarch, though. Dr. Anderson, members of the board, community, as was just said, unfortunately, our athletic director, Eric Duffson, is not able to join us tonight. He's dealing with a family emergency. That is the #1 priority for him right now. So I get the privilege of talking about the great things happening in Monarch Athletics. We are a 5A JASA classification school. Our football team does compete at the 4A as part of the Longs Peak League Conference. All our other programs are part of the Front Range League. We have around 940 participants, student athletes, of a school made up of just under 1,700. So nice, large, over 50% participation in athletic program. And we do have multiple sport athletes, which in this day and age seems to be more and more a rarity. And so we take great pride in the students participating in multiple athletic opportunities and or clubs. We do have a little bit of a disparity between our numbers between our female and male students. And that's something that we are working to address, so we have more parity of opportunity and more parity of action. Next slide, please. So moving into some strengths that we received from the survey, and we, like other schools, promoted our survey through multiple means. My weekly voicemail message, if you're a Monarch parent, my voice comes across your voicemail every Friday evening. We also sent it out through our email servers for all parent participants through Eric Gustafson's office and school messenger. But we now identified a couple strengths. The first one is our athletes feel comfortable balancing the demands of school and sport, and that's really important. We want kids to participate. It's a hallmark of Monarch High School, and we want them to participate not only in their athletics, but also in the rigorous courses that they are interested in and they want to participate within. And so being able to balance that and feel like they can balance that is definitely a strength of ours that we take great pride in. And also our athletes felt positive about their coaches. That relationship between the student athlete and their coach is critical for not only for athletic success, but the individual success of the program and overall program success. Our focus areas, better communication. I think we all could probably be a little bit better in that. And there's multiple ways we can be enhancing our communication, both proactive, but then the celebratory emails or communication notifications that come through our means. Feedback to coaches, taking what we learn from surveys and from our student athletes themselves and having the conversation directly with the coach and encouraging coaches and parents to have that conversation when appropriate, but wanting to make sure we get the feedback because we want to grow all our individuals, not only our athletes, but also our coaches and their own growth as coaches. And then obviously, like we've heard before, some low survey participation, which when we use data to inform what we do, we want high end value, and having low participation, you kind of start wondering where the actual influence is. But we look at them all, and I, with Eric Gustafson, sit down and go through all the survey results with him. So we're a team on that, and we collaborate and facilitate the thought that can come from that. Some action items. So next slide, please. Wait, no, we're here. All right. One thing we know is we want to increase our coaching staff education. To do this, we have utilized the athletic survey to inform coaches of any trends the data will show to help drive how we move forward. So we actually use the survey and use it proactively to guide next steps for our coaches so they can continue on their own growth. Coaches meetings that we have before each season include topics of electronic communication through the use of BVSD email, group communication, and other sources of avenue of two-way communication such as Team Snap and the appropriate use of text messaging. We discuss athlete safety, including concussions and our concussion protocol, make sure we're up to speed on that on a regular basis with our coaches and our athletic trainer, as well as the importance of hydration and proper nutrition, of which we need to make sure we continue to do because our hot summer months, we want to make sure our students are maintaining their nutritional values so they can ensure their max effort on the field does not negatively impact them physically. Coaches are apprised of CHSAA bylaws and rule changes, and our athletic code of conduct is also reviewed throughout each one of the seasons to ensure that we're abiding by all CHSAA rules and BVSD policies. For athlete education, we have a unique opportunity that's presented to us with our shift in our schedule, and we designed multiple opportunities for students to access their teachers for additional help. We call it at Monarch High School Access Time. And in our new schedule, we have worked with our National Honor Society, our peer tutoring program, Eric and myself and the leaders of those to start designing athletic study tables that are led by peers during access time. This is a really great opportunity for us. It's a work in process, but the idea being that if a student is on the academic and eligibility list or warning list, they would be required to go to an athletic study table where we're going to create a check-in, check-out process that they would then go be able to check back in with their coach with no negative ramifications applied to them because they are students first and we need to care for their future through their academic rigors and success. And so we want to get them eligible. And so we're building that right now and designing it for implementation in the fall. We are, as well as our athletic coaches and the teachers, excited about this opportunity because we think it has and bodes a lot of great promise for us and our continued success at Monarch High School. And then finally, our last action item is continuing strengthening the relationship between our high school and our local community. We've really worked on developing a really strong booster program at Monarch High School, and we know that communication is the key and ongoing challenge to this. We'll continue with strong booster communication and with a team liaison as a liaison from each team on the booster club. And I personally, myself and Eric Gustafson, will continue our efforts to be present and strengthen our understanding relationship with the Monarch community, either through Booster Club and the things that come from that, and or just our general area community within Louisville and Superior. Next slide, please. So our Booster Club has grown. This year we just hosted our first Booster Bash, which was a great success. That was a fundraising opportunity, and all those proceeds went into our programming at at Monarch High School. And it's enabled us to also develop through our Booster Club weekly communications that the boosters get to highlight celebrations, provide reminders, and give the critical information for our community to be engaged with. And that goes out each week from our community, from our Booster Club, and the community liaison is associated with that. We have used our booster connections to a larger community tables to encourage more athletic survey participation, as well as other means to support our programs for all students. Next slide. So some celebrations. We are Palm State runners-up to Broomfield High School, but because we believe in collective efficacy in Boulder Valley, we were celebrating Broomfield just like I know they were celebrating us for being first and second place, which was great. Recently, we were league champions in baseball. I believe that was last year, and league champions in boys lacrosse as well. Next slide. We had top 10 finishes for boys and girls cross country and an individual state wrestling champion this year as well, which was recently, who was recently honored at the superintendent's honor roll. And then next slide, please. We've also seen top 10 finishes in our boys and girls track, regional boys tennis champions, and we recently had 2 state champions in track and field, Max and Mia Manson in pole vault. Max Manson's up for the Gatorade Track Athlete of the Year for the state of Colorado, as well as I believe our number 2 girls doubles team won the state championship as well, which was really exciting to have happen. And at a club level, I believe that our rugby and ultimate frisbee teams competed well, with one of our ultimate frisbee teams winning the state ultimate frisbee championship and the other one receiving getting second place. So thank you for your ongoing support. At Monarch High School, just like all the other schools, we truly believe in the student athlete. And students come first and the athletes come second, but they work in tandem to create great kids. And we have great kids throughout Boulder Valley, not just at Monarch, but also all the high schools. So thank you for your ongoing support. We're proud of the work we do each and every single day, and we look forward to the continued growth of our programming at Monarch and the success of our programs in and out of the classroom. At this time, I'd like to introduce Nederland High School to you as they'll present their successes for the recent survey.
Members of the board, Dr. Anderson, my name is Chuck Doudna. I am the assistant principal and athletic director at Nederland Middle Senior High School. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to share the status of our programs. Nederland, good work, we're on track. So Nederland High School competes into the 2A CHASA classification, and we compete within the Mile High League. Currently, our high school this last year had 144 students enrolled in it. Within that, we had 160 students participate in athletics. So the reason that number's slightly higher, it's very impressive, but that's because we host the school's ski team. So we have a lot of numbers come up from down below. And then just like Monarch mentioned, we do have a lot of students who are multiple sport athletes. So that's the reason for that number being slightly higher. Our male participation is slightly lower than our female participation, but our schools, our size, not that noticeable. And then the winter sports do have a slight spike, as I mentioned, because of the ski team participation. Next slide, please. So the athletic survey findings indicated a few things to us at Nederland. The strengths, one of them is that our students feel comfortable being able to balance their athletic demands as well as their school demands. So they find a nice balance there. They're able to participate in both equally, if you will. Also, our students and our athletes feel that they have a positive relation with their coaches, which is a huge part of their success, both in and out of the classroom. Areas that we need to focus on based on the athletic survey. The first one being communication with our stakeholders. That's something we definitely need to focus on, as well as participation and our overall school spirit in Nederland. So, the action items that we are taking to address those focus areas. Under communication, administration, both Rick and myself have made it a point to attend our Panther parent meetings, which is a monthly meeting. It's our booster club. They meet once a month to discuss fundraisers, different ways to host banquets, help out, get involved, things like that. So we made it a point to get there and stay in communication with them and what they're doing. We've also emphasized what our students have going on athletically in our daily announcements, not just all of us wins, if you will, but also noting effort that was given by a certain student, even though they might not have taken first place or won the game. Additionally, we also have made it a point to post things in our Panther Post, which is our school's newsletter. It's a great way to get things out to the community as far as what we're doing. Ways we've attempted to address participation. The big thing we've focused on at Nederland is addressing our youth. So the kids coming up, if you will, in our feeder programs, getting ready to come to us. So we currently have 3 youth programs going. We have a youth soccer program, as well as basketball and volleyball. So those are up and running. And then in an attempt to heighten our school spirit, we have attempted to solicit as much participation from our elementary school as possible. We have invited them up to sing the national anthem during our games, our sporting events, and also have them engaged in halftime activities. We do a beanbag toss fundraiser, so we get them involved in what we're doing so that they feel a part of our environment. Yep, next slide. Thank you. So, successes for Nederland High School this year. We did a survey with our students. Our football program was struggling, so we did a survey to find out what our kids wanted to participate in. So with that, we made the decision to bring back boys soccer. So this year we brought back boys soccer, and with that, our numbers went from 9 athletes participating in football to 19 participating in soccer this year. So that's a huge jump as far as kids getting involved. Next slide, please. Sticking with boys soccer, our boys soccer coach, Luis Gonzalez, who is also our Spanish teacher at our high school, was named the Mile High League Coach of the Year. So great honor for him in our school. And then in addition, that was completed since this slideshow was put together, Helen Cross is a runner on our track team, and she took 4th place at the state track meet in the mile, even with being extremely sick. So we're incredibly proud of her. And so, as TK mentioned, I'm going completely off script for those who've heard it a couple times, but as TK mentioned, he's on his way out. His tenure is ending. So I began my tenure at Christmas break this year. And so I just want to say thank you really quick to the other athletic directors, and as well as Michelle DeBerry and Rick Ellertson, stepping into a position that you are completely unfamiliar with. I had a lot of questions. So they were wonderful. So we have good people working in our district, as you know and you just heard. So thank you to them. With that, I will reintroduce Michelle DeBerry, who will discuss with you district level findings and strategies. Thank you for your time.
I will be very succinct, I promise. TK is going back into the math classroom at his choice, which is a great benefit for the Fairview math students, and they're lucky to have him, and we'll pull him in every once in a while. As you've heard, we've had about 5,000 participants. Now, a multi-sport athlete is duplicated within that count, so it's not 5,000 athletes, individual athletes. But good participation compared to our neighboring districts. We host 17 sports, 19 at some schools with specialty programs, 6 high schools, as well as Peak to Peak and Justice. Peak to Peak and Justice fund and manage their programs independently as charter schools, so that's why they weren't included this evening, but we do want to acknowledge their efforts to help students be connected through athletic participation. Next slide. When we looked at the data district-wide as a review committee, We were really glad that parents believe participation encourages good choices for time management, academics, and citizenship, and that 88% of the students say that they have fun in participation. And as education-based athletic programs, that's very meaningful to us. We want to work on the fact that 19% disagree that we establish and consistently implement practices. And we want to get a higher support that administration is helpful with addressing concerns. As a result, next slide, the actions that I took at the district level included the development of Coach's Handbook that will outline the expectations and procedures that we should be upholding, and we can communicate that more thoroughly to our coaches as well as our student athletes. That'll roll out in August. Emmy has been piloting senior exit interviews, and we're trying to figure out how to do that on a grand scale. We have identified an outside vendor to help us do that so that it's anonymous, and hopefully students and parents will participate. Obviously, we took the data seriously from the survey. We'll continue to work on doing a better job of getting survey feedback and making sure that we're responding and listening to the feedback from our constituents. In 1920, Monarch High School will be piloting a mentoring program for developing coaches as they're onboarding or as they're struggling, using both coaches within their buildings as well as coaches from other schools outside of the neighborhood. So we're looking forward to seeing how that helps us attract and retain high-quality coaches. I do want to mention that the extra duty task force that's chaired by Margaret Crespo in conjunction with Human Resources and the union will have their final meeting of the year on June 3rd, and hopefully we'll have some update with you there on that information there. And I wanted to mention I had hoped to have the disaggregated data by ethnicity for middle and high school for you today, but the move has made my office staff a little stressed out in pulling that, but I promise by 2 weeks from Friday in News and Notes we'll get it to you, Dr. Anderson. I know that that's very important. I would like to say that as we're moving forward at our last meeting, we agreed that our past focus has been on the survey and that our future focus needs to be on also addressing some problems that we know that exist outside of what would be fleshed out in the survey. And so we would like your permission to use the 1920 school year to talk about some topics like budget, like policy, hiring practices, and some other guidelines that are maybe more operational and a little further away from the parent and student purview, but are really instrumental in supporting good athletic programs. And so I would propose that we do that in monthly meetings with a different topic and bring in experts, HR, to talk about hiring practices, et cetera, legal counsel to talk about our board policies. And then come back to you a year from now with an update both on what we've done from the survey as well as what we would like to recommend from that. And so with that, I will go to celebrations. Had a great unified event at Monarch High School. We hosted our Ninja unified program, and all 5 of our high schools participated. It was a great event. And we continue to do great work with a leader from each of our buildings to increase our unified participation program offerings so that we're servicing all the needs of all of our students. Next slide. Eric Gustafson, Athletic Director, was named the 5A Athletic Director of the Year at the recent conference. And we are thrilled to have recruited him from Adams 12 and hope to retain him for a long time to come. And Paul Roper was honored, next slide, yep, as the retired Athletic Director of the Year. Paul's been serving this year as interim assistant principal at Centaurus, where he was the athletic director, but he's been being the mean guy, the discipline and attendance guy, and helped us a lot at Centaurus, so we were thrilled to be able to honor him. And I just can't say enough about all the work that our schools do and these great guys and Emmy that we get to work with every day. Thank you for commissioning this work and making us focus. We appreciate having the data, and I hope you know that we've taken it very, very seriously and will continue to respond. So I'm available if you have any questions.
All right, thank you so much. That was a great presentation, and thanks to all of you for coming here. Board members, want to start? Let's start with Kathy, and then Kitty, and then we'll go to the left.
First, Shelley, I want to thank you because it took years for you to get this launched, and this was a great presentation, so thank you for sticking to it and then attending all the meetings on top of everything else on your plate. So thank you, and I'm hoping you can continue to do this through the rest of your board service and maybe even after. But thank you. It had a richness of data that I didn't think we would get, so I really appreciate all the hard work on that. So Michelle, I appreciate you bringing up the ethnicity. Will it also have the data broken down by free and reduced lunch? Will we be able to get that in there as well?
I can add that. In the ethnicity, I think the last box. So we have 7 years of trend data that we can do for ethnicity, but I believe the last box on the report includes free and reduced. If it doesn't have the 7 years trend, I'll at least start the trend with this year's data. That shouldn't be a problem at all.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful to have that data. And then just a couple other questions. What I really appreciate was the focus on the students and from everybody. And what I'm wondering is, what I heard from some of them is how they can cross-pollinate some of their good practices, so I assume that's what you'll be looking at going forward. I really appreciated what Mr. Hartnett had to say about making sure that when students come forward that that the students don't have ramifications taken out against them for speaking their voice, and I'm sure that's a hard thing, because sometimes students are acting out a little bit as opposed to having legitimate concerns, and sometimes they're legitimate concerns. So I think that's really hard to ferret out. Are you going to drop the surveys completely? Do you not find them to be helpful? Is that your recommendation going forward?
Sorry, I'm glad you offered me the opportunity to clarify that. We are going to continue with the survey and look at some other ways of doing it, including bringing teams into a lab and having a teammate facilitate, or having it on a cell phone app. So we will continue to respond to that. I was referencing the focus of the committee moving into next year not being so much about the survey that we've taken the last 18 months on.
And you'll change the survey going forward too?
We will look at that and evaluate what the survey questions, what we need to keep so that we can follow trends and what we can change.
Are there unified sports offered in every high school, or is it just the one ninja event that you had?
No, there's unified sports offered in 2 different ways. So there's a PE class at each high school, and they do things within the school day. Jen Dixon and Kyle Addington coordinate those through the PE department over the last year, and they've really increased to try to do at least 1 per quarter. So they did bowling, ninja, they had the basketball season, and I think some of them did flag football. And then there's the outside of the school day, the extracurricular activities that we've done. We've had a hard time pinning down exactly what to add next, but we're looking at soccer, flag football, and/or bowling. And ideally, we would have, again, 1 in each fall, winter, and spring for the unified programs outside of the school day.
I would imagine maybe transportation for those outside of school day would be a little challenging too, as well, because you would only offer it one at a central location. Is that what you're thinking?
We've been bringing, like for the ninja event, we brought all the schools to 1 location. For the basketball season, we have 5 schools that participate, so you have at least 2 games at home and 2 games on the road. So they get the full experience of traveling to other teams and having the different experiences in the different gyms, and they're quite different celebrations.
Right, thank you. And thank you again to all of the athletic directors for coming and sharing your stories and all of the lessons learned and the hopes for going forward. It's been a great presentation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Kitty?
Yeah, one of the questions I had is, it seems like every single school, one of the problems was low participation. What percentage of athletes and parents participated?
I don't have that answer, but I will include it in the sports participation data for you, both by winter, spring, and fall for the last 2 years.
Okay, because that says a lot about, do the answers reflect the majority of the kids? Were only the kids who felt a certain way responding? It'd be hard to know if you have low participation. So I'm happy to hear you're thinking of different ways of getting them to do it. And the other thing, and it's not really so much about this presentation, but Monarch mentioned concussion protocols. And so I'm just curious about injuries in football, concussions, other head injuries, and, what do we do about that? And are we seeing them increase, decrease, stay the same? And do you know?
So we have a brain injury response team, BERT team, and that's headed by Stephanie Farron. And it is co-chaired by a doctor whose name escapes me. I'll randomly spit it out in a
Sherry
minute.
Ballantyne?
Thank you very much. Dr. Ballantyne. And they work together both for our school protocol, our return to academics, our return to physical education, our return to athletics. And I'll send you a link to a very exhaustive concussion page that we have on our website, as well as the manual there. And then I can have the athletic trainers pull the concussion injuries. They document and track all of their injuries that they respond to throughout the year and get that out to you.
And follow-up question on that is that, are we seeing lower participation in football? 'Cause I hear about it anecdotally in the community, but I don't know are we seeing it
At
in
the
the
middle
schools?
level, we're struggling. We have 11 middle schools, and we're down to 5 schools that are solid, and usually 1 or 2 that float in or out. So every year we have a vote on, are we going to offer football again next year or find something to replace? At the high school level, Boulder High's program was probably the program that was struggling the most, but they've certainly made a rebound through the efforts to organize a league where they're competing against like schools with like issues, as well as hiring an in-building coach who can attract and retain those student athletes. And they're partnering, Boulder and Fairview are partnering for a youth camp for elementary and middle school students this summer to include participation. So I would say it has gone down, but it has not gone down significantly, but that will be reflected in that 7-year trend data in the sport of football, both at the middle level and high school.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thanks for the T-shirt.
Yeah, absolutely.
I too want to thank you, Shelley, for your tenacity in terms of making this thing going, okay? Thank you very much. And Michelle, thank you so much for the information. And all of the athletic coaches, thank you so much for providing us with all this wonderful information. One question that I do have, are the athletic directors or high schools, are they doing anything special to recruit more students to come into the sports? Specifically, maybe more Latino students to come into the sports?
Does anyone want to speak to that? I don't know of individual efforts. We have preseason meetings. We send out flyers and notifications to increase awareness, but in terms of direct outreach?
I can say at Fairview that we've utilized the skill sets of our interventionist, community liaison, to help communicate to the Latino community about our tryout dates and participation. A lot of times we fail in that regard in sharing the information. So we're looking at developing the communication in multiple languages to make sure that those kids know ahead of time when the tryout dates are, so that they have the opportunity to participate.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm wondering if through the Latino Parent Advisory Council, I know that they're mostly elementary parents in that Latino Parent Advisory Council, if we can get some Latino parents at the high school level and, maybe do something like that through the Latino Parent Advisory Council.
I think it's also important to note and compliment the Board of Education on maintaining our middle-level athletic programs, because in many of our neighboring communities, they've dropped middle-level programs, which means only affluent athlete families are participating in clubs that are pricey, $3,000, $5,000, $8,000, and there aren't opportunities that are free or minimal to other athletes. Our participation at Casey and Angevine over the last 3 to 5 years has really grown, and that gives all students, regardless of affluence or ethnicity, the opportunity to learn the skills, practice the skills, and seek out if they're interested in the sport. And that's really valuable, and it's a commitment on your behalf of about 1.1 million.
Right, because I know statistically that those kids that do participate in extracurricular activities, including athletic programs,
Yep.
do finish, complete school on time, and do well in school, so.
Yep.
Okay. Donna, Sam, Shelley? Shelley?
So Michelle, I just want to thank you. This was a very unwieldy task that you took on, and I thought you wrangled it pretty well and got us to a place, I think, that is helpful. I don't think it's everything we need, but I think it's helpful. So I want to thank you for that. And I think you guys all saw tonight what really dedicated ADs we have in the district, and you're not seeing that many coaches here tonight, but the principals were also really involved in this. There were a lot of coaches in that group. There were parents in that group, a couple of just community members, I think. So it was a really pretty broad-based group that got together and met regularly. And I don't think there's a job that's busier than an AD job in this district. And so for them to make time to come to these, I think speaks to how important they thought this topic was. Could also be because they were persuaded by Michelle, but I think they were there because they thought it was important. I think that, like many of you know that for years I've been talking about this, and the reason I have is because I got so exposed to the issues that happen in athletics. My daughter, she played 4 sports all 4 years in high school. She played since she was born, and she was one of those kids that stepped on the court and played varsity as a freshman. And then there was my son, who wasn't quite as athletic, who got cut from the sophomore team, and so basketball team. So I've seen it all, I've seen the kids who do really well. I've seen the kids who've struggled. I've been around hundreds of parents on all of these teams who have shared their issues with me along the way. So when I got on the school board, this was really important to me because I know that it's about 60% of our students that play in high school. And sometimes they're with their coaches more than they're with their parents. They're certainly with their coaches more than they're with any of their teachers during the day. So I think it's really important that we're spending this time and these resources trying to figure some of this out. And I would say that in general, what I've seen from the ADs as part of this group is that they're super supportive of their coaches. And they need to be, because coaching isn't an easy job. They don't get paid very much. They get a lot of grief, along the way. So I'm really glad to see that. What I feel like sometimes happens, though, is that the conversations that go on in the AD's office with a coach aren't always the same conversations that go on between a coach and a kid. So those conversations can be all very upbeat and, all by policy and all by rules. And then sometimes those coaches get on the field with kids and, all their emotions come up and all their sort of lack of self-awareness, which we all have, comes out in those situations. And they can say and do things that are extremely hurtful. So I am really glad to see the emphasis on coach mentoring, coach training. I'd like to see some of that training have to do with self-awareness. Like, what is it about that kid that bugs you? Get at that personal understanding of that before you take it out on the kid. Because I can tell you, as long as a kid is happy and feels like things are fair on the court or on the field, the parent's happy. And if the parents are happy, the coaches are happy. And if the coaches are happy, the ADs are happy. And if the ADs are happy, the principals are happy. And if the principals are happy, the school board members are happy. So I feel like it all takes place between the coach and that kid. And I think that's where the rubber hits the road, and I think that that's where our emphasis needs to be. So I think that your reshifting of the focus in a future year to operating, type issues, I think some of that needs to be done, but I really think it's all about coach training and coach awareness and ADs really understanding what's happening on the field when a coach leaves the office. That's where I think sometimes things break down. And I've seen such great coaches over the years. And I feel like that's another thing that isn't identified here is there are coaches that have hundreds of athletes that play for them or run for them. And they're mostly 100% happy. That coach is a model coach. And we should be talking to those coaches about what they do versus the coach that has an entire team quit, and nobody really quite understands what happened there. Those are coaches you want to look at and go, why did that happen? And there's both kinds. And I think as much as this survey is helpful, I think there are other ways to get at some of what's going on out there on the field and in the court. And to your question, Kitty, about participation, I think some of these surveys, it was in the 20%, if I'm remembering correctly. So that's a little bit too low, I mean, statistically, to know exactly what's going on. And we're also still surveying kids who are still in the program. We're not necessarily surveying the kids who just had it and they've left, you know, and we're not surveying those parents. So it's not for lack of trying. I think that, you know, they put the survey out there, they tried there, but I think that all those efforts that people were sharing about how to increase participation is pretty important if we want to really, you know, get the whole picture. I think too, it's really important to look at some of the unintended consequences of doing some of these action items that are listed. We've had many conversations over the years about wanting more in-building coaches. And we've looked at Broomfield and we've said, maybe they're so good because they have, you know, all these in-building coaches. And I think it's more than just that. I think it's Ginger's leadership, you know, I think it's the culture in that school. But I have people say to me, you know, I get why in-building coaches is good, but that also means that teaching comes first. So we want to make sure that in-building coach is an incredible teacher in addition to being a good coach. And people come to me and say, when my child's teacher is a coach, they end up with subs for half the season, especially if they're at the end of the day, right? So I think we need to just look at the whole thing and say, okay, it's great to have in-building coaches, but let's make sure that kids who are not athletes don't suffer because they have an in-building coach somehow. So there's just these ripples of everything that we do that need to be kind of tracked down and made sure that we don't have unintended consequences. And I was a little surprised that there wasn't more conversation tonight about the male-female issue, because that seemed to come up more consistently than I think Neil mentioned it from Monarch. But there were definitely questions about that, and I think it would be good to try and dig in and maybe have some focus groups with parents of female athletes and find out why people are feeling that way. I think I said at one meeting that we're pretty careful as a district not to have any disparity in our spending or in our number of sports. So I don't think that's it. I think it's more of a cultural issue in the schools, which would be interesting to get at. Yeah, I think there's some things the survey's not really getting at. And so the question is, how do you get at it? How do you get to the people that will tell you the real story? You know, and I know you want to hear that, and I appreciate that. So, yeah, so those are my comments, and thank you so much, Michelle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, Sam or Donna? Nope. You guys are all set? All right. Well, thank you so much, and we look forward to. Yeah. Loud and clear, team. Thanks for coming. We look forward to hearing from you next year. And so the board is going to take a 5 to 7 minute break. All right. So on to another slightly meaty topic, the strategic planning update, which we've been anticipating.
Great. Good evening, President Marquis, members of the board, Dr. Anderson. It's an honor to present to you this evening an update on our strategic planning process. So next slide, please. As you can see from this timeline, we are right at the beginning of phase 3 of this strategic planning process. And I believe the last time that we presented to you, we were towards the beginning of phase 2. So we've been progressing really quickly through this process. At this point, we have developed both objectives and strategic initiatives that we're ready to present to you this evening after a lot of work by our action teams and also feedback from our principals and from our Equity Summit participants. I also want to give thanks to Carolyn Noe, our communications specialist for ISE, and Jennifer Garfield, our director of science and instructional systems, who served as the project managers for helping us to move this along through this process as quickly as we have. So their role has been really critical. Next slide. Oh, we're good. Okay. So as you can see, we've been through multiple steps of this process, starting really broad with the mission and vision of our organization, which have remained the same since the last strategic planning process. From those, we really mapped out our priority student outcomes and our strategic themes, which were really broad areas in which we wanted to make improvement throughout the district. From those themes, we developed some strategic objectives that really helped us to focus in and start to make some choices about how we wanted to address those themes and really achieve those long-term student outcomes. And then for each of those objectives, really mapped out a couple of specific strategic initiatives or areas of focus for our work where we will be investing some significant effort over the next couple of years. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of an overview about the development of these objectives and initiatives. So we engaged our strategy team leaders who've joined us here this evening and will be presenting their individual themes to you. They attended a training back in February and then met through the months of February, March, and April, which was a really compressed time frame. I really want to express my gratitude to them for investing a really significant amount of time during that time frame to ensure that they were able to complete the objectives and initiatives for these plans. They also leveraged some research. So we engaged a research consultant, Shelley Billig, who did research summaries for each theme for us. So she and her research team compiled evidence of various strategies that have been really successful in each of these themes, backed up by research evidence, and provided that to each of the strategy team leaders so that they could use that in their planning process. And they can speak to that as they go over some of the choices that they made in their planning process. Dr. Jonathan Dings and Dr. Claire Sims also assisted the teams in finding additional data that they might need and helping them think about how they might craft their objectives so that they might be measurable. And then finally, we got some feedback from our building leaders. So all of our principals gave us some feedback on an earlier draft of the objectives and the initiatives. And at our most recent Equity Summit, we got a significant amount of community feedback from the perspective of how equity was infused throughout the entire strategic plan. Next slide, please. This is just the summary of all of the long-term outcomes, themes, objectives, and initiatives. So there are 6 overall objectives and 13 specific initiatives. I'm going to let the teams go into those in detail so we don't have to try to read the really tiny print on this slide. Next slide, please. And so now I am going to hand it off to Dr. Nativity Miller and Kiffany Lychok, who were our strategy team co-chairs for the theme that looked at ensuring all instruction is challenging, engaging, relevant, and meets the needs of all students.
Good evening. As Sam said, Kiffany and I led Theme 1, and we are very excited about the development of both our objectives and the initiatives that were developed this spring on our strategy team. We conducted a deep exploration of many different research studies and were provided with many different kinds of feedback from a variety of stakeholder groups. Due to our time constraints tonight, we would like to highlight the research and feedback that we received for Initiative 1A and 1B. Next slide, thank you. For Objective 1, the strategy team developed 3 initiatives to help us achieve the objective of increasing alignment to a guaranteed and viable instructional model. Those initiatives are Strategic Initiative 1A is create a standards-based scope and sequence pre-K through 12. 1B is define and implement common and aligned instructional practices. And 1C is design support systems to maximize school-based administrators' instructional leadership capacity. During the various stakeholder input sessions, we heard consistently that we lack an instructional model that is systematic in nature, which may be a root cause to our disparities in achievement. We believe that creating a scope and sequence paired with aligned and common instructional practices will provide consistency and coherence across our PK-12 to ensure that all students have access to high-quality learning outcomes, regardless of the school that they attend, the circumstances within their lives, their background experiences, languages that they speak, and/or ability levels.
As part of our strategic team work, we also found that research supports the creation of a prioritized scope and sequence that's designed to foster deeper learning for students. Research also supports that a standards-based scope and sequence, as well as aligned and common instructional practices, help to close achievement and access gaps for non-dominant students, for which BVSD has set a long-term student outcome. Next slide. Objective number 2 for Strategy Team 1 seeks to continue and expand upon work that has already been happening in our district for a number of years around the multi-tiered systems of support rollout.
In order to increase fidelity to the work that has already begun, Initiative 2A will expand upon that work and will also ensure that it is culturally responsive in support of all of our learners in BVSD. Additionally, the redefinition and complete development of an adaptive assessment framework to help inform teachers about the progress of their learners to best serve them inside of a tiered system of support is a key component of ensuring the fidelity and of the alignment. We look forward to the next steps in the process so that we can better support our educators and better serve our students in the Boulder Valley School District. And with that, we are going to introduce Strategy Team 2.
So for Strategy Team 2, I'm very pleased to bring to the podium Terry Mulford and Melissa Riberty.
Good evening, everyone. I want to just say it was a pleasure to be asked to do this work with Strategy Team 2, and it was really a pleasure to work with Melissa in a different capacity. We spend a lot of time solving problems together with HR meetings, and it was kind of fun to get to know her in a little bit different way. So 2 weeks ago, Bill Sutter and Mike Gratis, along with Patty Delgado, Nancy Piercy, and Lori Hattendorf, presented a report for the weighted student resource allocation, directing resources towards student needs MOU. The recommendations from this work group were to continue the development of the distribution of resources through a weighted and/or differentiated methodology, and to align the implementation of a system with the district's strategic plan. Next slide, please. Strategic Theme 2 aligns with the MOU work presented to you on May 14th. For Objective 3, the strategy team developed 3 initiatives to help us achieve our objective of providing schools and educators with responsive and customized supports, and resources in this context are referring to people, time, and money.
Okay. And in developing the initiatives, we looked at research documenting how school systems have successfully allocated resources based on student need. And one thing to note from that research is that the equitable allocation of resources on its own is insufficient to transform schools and school systems. However, what it does do is create the conditions for success. And so the proper allocation of resources that's driven by student growth and outcomes will support the work of other themes and provide the necessary scaffolds to reach the long-term student outcomes. And so community and principal feedback really stress the need for these resources to be allocated based on need and not a standard, one-size-fits-all approach. So the first 2 initiatives under Theme 2 are designed to create a tiered system of resource allocation along with accountability metrics. What we also heard from the community and discussed a lot in our team is that those accountability metrics need to be more than just test scores. So that's going to be a big part of it. We're going to look at student growth and make sure that all students are succeeding academically, but we're also going to look at a whole body of evidence to make sure that that's happening.
The final initiative creates a process to continually review and measure the impact of our work that it has on long-term student outcomes. The initial inventory audit of current programming will be completed, and future commitment to each initiative will be identified. Then, a repurposing of the allocation of funds and human resources will occur to support identified focused initiatives. Thank you.
So next to present the work under strategic theme number 3, I'd like to invite Aubrey Ye and Ari Gerzon-Kessler to the podium.
Good evening. We really enjoyed leading strategy team number 3, and one thing I want to point out is in a previous draft of this, you may have seen that the language for strategic theme number 3 was harness the talent and passion of our community. And one thing that we really heard through the Equity Summit was that that word harness had some power dynamics to it that maybe weren't exactly what we intended to communicate. So we did update it to state engage the talent and passion of our community and families through communication, empowerment, and partnership. Next slide.
So our first objective is focused on increasing and improving school-family connections to develop a more supportive and collaborative environment that promotes equitable incomes and removes barriers. And when we look at the initiative level, it's to strengthen school-family connectedness through the implementation of consistent district-wide strategies that improve communication, collaboration, and belonging. And it was tremendously valuable to have such an array of feedback from community members, whether it was the 5 input sessions, the Equity Summit, the input from our school leaders. And it particularly was helpful as we got closer to the end of this process, where the Equity Summit really pushed us as a team to go back and look at how we could more deeply infuse the themes of equity into our initiative and partner it with what the research had been telling us. The other part that really informed this initiative as we thought about how do we take best practice and make it more system-wide across BVSD was some of the work in family partnerships centered around our 4 pillars that we developed last spring based on the work of Susan Auerbach and Authentic Family Partnerships, and developing 4 pillars that really focus on relationships and trust, two-way communication, cultivating the social, emotional, and academic well-being of our students and families, and then finally giving our families more decision-making and voice. So those pillars really are pushing us as we flesh out this initiative, and I think the final piece I'd share is our aim is to take the pockets of success that have been cultivated and think about how do we spread that district-wide to all of our schools.
And the second objective under our theme was about community partnerships and really optimizing community partnerships. So as we explored this theme, we started realizing that we don't actually have any kind of comprehensive list or overview of all of the partners. We're lucky to live in Boulder with so many willing partners. And while different departments or areas have some, inventory of what they have, we don't have anything comprehensive. And so being that we don't even have a list of our partners, we don't have a system, and we don't really have a great way to analyze or kind of look at, are they really helping us meet our goals and what we want for our students, our long-term student outcomes. And so the research really showed that developing a district-wide system would help us make some progress in this. So that's largely what Initiative 5A is about. And the second one really grew out of a lot of the community input sessions that happened in January about having different pathways for students and preparing all students for postgraduate success, whatever that looks like for them. This really links directly to the long-term student outcome of every student graduates empowered with the skills necessary for postgraduate success. And one really good resource we've been able to look at is CDE, Colorado Department of Education, has a work-based learning continuum that we expect to be kind of a good guiding document as we move into the action planning of this initiative. And with that, I think we're on to theme 4. Thank you.
And next, I'd like to invite Maya Jorgensen, who was one of the 2 co-chairs for strategy team number 4. Katie Romero joined her in co-chairing that work, but was unable to be here this evening.
This work in our theme is particularly exciting because 4 years ago, if you remember 2016, we had CASEL do a resource and needs assessment, and one of the primary things that came out of the recommendations was make sure that social and emotional learning is embedded in your strategic plan. So it's kind of nice that that's come full circle 4 years later. So we have just one objective for our theme that has 2 initiatives as part of it. We used CASEL for a lot of our research, not only through their needs, resource and needs assessment that they did for us, but obviously they have just an incredible wealth of research and knowledge that we accessed, not only for the social and emotional learning, but they have a lot of research that ties the social and emotional learning with equity. So we used that research for both of our initiatives. We also used the National School Climate Council, and just a piece of their research that really emphasized our theme was that school climate is the greatest predictive factor in any school's capacity to promote student achievement. So that was sort of our building block that we used in our meetings. So our one objective was to align to a common research-based framework that ensures all students and adults feel supported, respected, and safe. This also was a theme that came out of the CASEL work that they did for us in 2016, really developing that common language and those common understandings of what we're even talking about with our SEL practices. And then in addition to that, making sure those practices are helping students feel safe, supported, and respected. We know that when students feel that way, particularly our students of color and our students living in poverty, it does absolutely affect their academics in a positive way. Our first initiative provides the support for students and adults to feel safe and respected. Our committee really looked at like, well, how are we going to do that? How are we going to foster that? Our first one was to define and put into practice culturally responsive principles and best practices that challenge inequity and bias. All of the listening sessions that Dr. Anderson did, and then quite a bit of the feedback from the Equity Summit was around this particular initiative. It really came out predominantly in your listening sessions, where they wanted to explore what sort of culturally responsive practices we're going to develop in BVSD. Those practices hoping to allow for more equitable opportunities to learn, access to structural and relational resources, challenging inequities in our system, challenging personal and institutional biases, all things that we've talked about time and again with Sam and our Equity Summit, hopefully are going to be a part of this initiative. Our second initiative was to develop and implement an employee support system to increase their overall wellness and efficacy in serving students. We know that, and we heard that tonight, I couldn't have been set up better than I was with those athletic directors. Much of what they talked about was culture and climate, building relationships, building understandings with students. And we know that if those coaches, as you pointed out, are unregulated, then they cannot do a good job of supporting our students. So this initiative was really aimed at particularly supporting the adults, the adults in our buildings, as well as at some level supporting the adults that are in families, and knowing that when we support teachers and our staff in our buildings, they can develop better relationships with students. They can serve as role models when they're regulating their own behavior, they're regulating their emotions, and then they're better able to support our students. So we did have one initiative that was pulled out just to support our staff and our adults. Thank you.
So I know that as our strategy team co-chairs got up here and expressed to you these plans in the distilled language that they brought forth, that doesn't capture the long conversations that happened in these committees to get to consensus over what those words mean. So I really want to commend them again for all of the really hard work they did facilitating these conversations with folks throughout the district to get to what I think represents a really great balance between being informed from evidence-based research and also incorporating the feedback and the values of our community, and being a nice balance between those two things, which has been a common thread throughout this entire strategic planning process. So clearly we can't do 13 initiatives all at once. And so we made some decisions about which ones to begin with in phase one. I want to emphasize that initiatives that are chosen to go in phase one, that doesn't mean that they're the most important. What it means is that those are the ones that we felt like had to go first in sequence in order to inform the initiatives that would come later, or that might take longer and so would require more time for those to really unfold over the course of the entire strategic plan. So the initiatives that were chosen to go in phase one were 1A and 1B around the scope and sequence and best instructional practices. 3A, which is about the tiered system of school resources, supports, and accountability. 3C, about the system to assess initiatives. 5A, which is about the system for strategically managing our partnerships. And 6A, which is about defining and implementing the best practices around culturally responsive teaching and leadership. Next slide, please. So from here, we start to jump into the action planning phase of this work. So right now, we have these very broadly defined initiatives. The next steps will be over the course of the summer. We've got action teams that were just trained this morning on a template that they will fill out and complete by the end of July, which will be very detailed action plans for how we will do this work over the next 3 to 5 years. Thank you, and I'll take questions if you have any.
All right, thank you so much. This was fabulous. Who would like to start out? Kitty.
Thanks for this presentation. It really helps me understand a little better exactly where we are and what we're doing. And I was having trouble thinking about how equity was going to be infused into this plan, and to hear you all talk about it makes me feel really good that we're on the right track. And I assume that as we drill down, that things will become more specific, so that we would know, like, what are we doing for Latino population? What are we doing for LGBTQ plus, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great comment. And not only did we take feedback at the Equity Summit on the wording of the actual objectives and initiatives, but we also asked the Equity Summit participants to give us input on what these initiatives might look like in their implementation, so that that could inform the action plans. And that feedback will be passed along to the action planning teams as well.
And then the other thing that just comes up for me when we're trying to create a place that doesn't have bias, doesn't have inequity, is allowing students to not engage in the learning because they don't believe in it, and how that would impact our work. Because if we have people who just refuse to engage for whatever reason, how are they going to then implement this culture? Well, they would, participate in the culture, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great comment.
Okay. Other comments, board members? Sam?
Thank you for your leadership of this, Sam, and thank you to all the strategic theme leaders. And I was super happy to see 6B, supporting our employees in their own emotional and physical wellness. I think that's just so important. I just coming back to like the first or second slide in terms of the planning process, and it seemed like kind of, maybe I missed it, but skipping over measures, like we have develop objectives, measures, initiatives. We had a pretty thorough high-level briefing on objectives and initiatives, but what happened to measuring these?
Yeah, so, thanks. Dr. Dings and Dr. Sims did advise each of the teams on some draft measures that could be used to really look at whether we were achieving each of these objectives. Those are still in process, and I believe that we'll be presenting those soon.
You'll be seeing those June 11th. And so, as part of our work session, really critical component, right? And so Jonathan has been engaged all along, but what I'll need from the board in our conversation is, number one, do we have the measures right? And then number two, what are the targets that we feel like together that we want to set that will continue to drive the work of the district? And so that work has been ongoing, but we'll be getting your feedback on June 11th on those pieces around specifically the long-term student outcomes. We will be developing and implementing fidelity of implementation measures throughout the entire document and really kind of have a scorecard that will be a little bit deeper. But for the public to hold us accountable to the things that we say that we want to do, which is to make sure all students benefit from challenging and relevant educational opportunities, that we're reducing disparities in achievement, and that all of our kids graduate empowered with the skills to be successful after they leave us. We'll want to have really public-facing measures on those, and those are measures that we'll discuss, and that we'll get your feedback and input on.
Shelley?
So how will those measures fit with the KPIs that we're going to discuss later this year? Are they the same or
different?
tied
These are tied directly to the strategic plan. On our annual plan, where we've talked about this idea of both operational and customer service KPIs, those will be other measures I think that we can look at to judge our performance and how we're serving our employees, how we're serving our parents, how we're working operationally to become more efficient and effective. Those will be different measures that could sit in a scorecard that sits next to the strategic plan.
Donna?
Thank you, Sam. I was taking notes as everyone was talking, and then my page got too full. But I liked one of the first things that you said is that you used data to craft objectives so they were measurable. And I want to thank all of you for your hard work. I've sat in the same positions you are and gone to many, many meetings in addition to my the roles that I did as an employee. So thank you. I know it's a lot of work. Also today we received a letter from NAACP, and I was trying to figure out how to answer them in their 13 objectives, and you probably read it as well, Sam, and I think that your presentation would answer just about everything they were addressing. So I'll tell them to watch the board meeting, or maybe they're watching it now. Thank you.
Kathy, then Rob.
So I am just feeling like I can't figure this out, and I don't know why, and maybe I just need to have another conversation offline, because I don't understand, number one, create a standards-based scope and sequence. I'm guessing it's because we're so site-based that we don't have something like that. I mean, can you explain a little bit more what that looks like and how that fits in then with CTE, and how it's not marrying us just to seat time as a measure of how our students are doing? That's where my brain went, so I'm just kind of curious about what that looks like and why. I mean, I get we have to do curriculum, but I'm just, if you could give me a little more understanding of that, it'd be helpful.
Sure, of course, and I think that probably you're reacting to it a similar way that I think a lot of people reacted to it when they first saw that. It is that it feels a little old school and traditional in the way that it's worded. But I think that, one, we've got a great opportunity with the new state standards that have just been recently adopted, that we need to go through a curriculum revision process anyway to be able to align our curriculum to the new state standards. What we have not done in BVSD is ever articulated specifically a sequence within the year that we ask schools to address the standards. When we have adopted curriculum, we've adopted what we want schools to accomplish by the end of that grade level or that course. but we have not prescribed for them the order that they should address those standards or the instructional activities that they should use. So a scope and sequence would go a little bit further than we've gone before with our curriculum documents and add a little bit more specificity to not just the what, but a little bit of the how. However, we want to be really cautious that we still allow our teachers the flexibility to be able to address individual student learning needs as well as student interest so that students can pursue their passions as appropriate in the course of pursuing these standards. So we've got a great team working on that this summer to think about how we will build a scope and sequence that I think embraces our more innovative approaches to education and instruction, but also ensures that we are guaranteeing a set of outcomes for our kids when they get to an end of a course.
Yeah, because I've been in districts where today's May 28th and every third grader is on this page.
That's
and
not what
I
we're gonna
think, yeah, okay.
Absolutely not.
But it is a balance, right? Because you said you're going into the how, which is the art of teaching, and so trying to figure out what that, and then I don't know that I heard much about how you weave in then the CTE and alternate pathways and capstones that we have as graduation requirements into all of that. I assume that's just the work you'll be doing over the summer?
Yes, I believe that the action team is going to be really thinking about how we incorporate all of our content areas as well as CTE and really think about how we're preparing kids for a variety of pathways that they might engage in once they get to high school and even before high school. We don't need to wait until high school for kids to start exploring some of the career pathways that might be available to them. That work can really begin in elementary and middle school.
And then just one quick question. There's been a lot of questions about the metrics, but how do you think about engaging our community to find out what's important to them when they look at their schools and what they want to see as a measure of outcomes as opposed to just the outcomes on test scores? So I was just curious how we're getting that feedback and engaging them in that conversation.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, and that's one of the challenges that I know that Dr. Dings and Dr. Anderson have been discussing in the development of the specific measures that they're going to be looking at. I think it is one of the more tricky things to measure quantitatively and accurately over time. And so I don't know exactly where we've landed on that.
Yeah, and just on the measures, I think if we do go to the community, I'd hope that we consider that parents' measures change over time. So what is important to a parent in elementary school might be pretty distinct than what's important in high school. And their children may change too, so it may not be a fixed data point as we go through that journey of parenting. And I really love the way that you did use language around the partnership and respect the incredible richness of the BVSD community and the resources we have. It's exciting to think how we could align those better and just how much stronger we could be to get those all going in one direction. I echo Sam on 6B, so I'm a little sad that the self-care for employees didn't make the cut this year, but I will put in my usual plug for the Depression Center in Denver, which has free self-care training sessions. So I do think as we deal with a population of kids who are more stressed out themselves, that our employees need to be more resilient and stronger than ever, and I hope that we can help them as much as we can during this year, the gap of lack of self-care.
It was very difficult for us to not put that one in phase one as well.
Can only imagine. I know. So, but thank you so much. Yeah.
I just want to publicly thank Sam Messier, who has been our lead cabinet member on this project, and I'm just so proud of the work that she's done, all of our team leaders, everybody who's engaged in this process. I've really pushed people around the pace, and I'm just so pleased that they not only have they been able to meet the deadlines that we've set, but have done it in a really thoughtful and engaging way, and have really just spent the time and energy on something that is going to potentially change the lives of kids that we have the opportunity to serve. I'm looking at a plan that's evidence-based, data-driven, student-focused, and anchored in the values of our community. And I think that's exactly where we need to be as a school district. So I can't wait to see the work of the action teams begin to evolve. I look forward to our conversations around metrics over the course of the next couple of weeks, and as everything starts to begin to come together, just very excited about the future of our district.
All right, well, with that, I'd like to move on to action items if the board members are okay to move forward. And thanks again to our strategic planning teams. All right, so action items, 7.1, personnel items. We good? Yeah, okay. 7.2, approval of minutes, May 14th, 2019, special meeting. 7.3, approval of minutes, May 14th, 2019, regular meeting. 7.4, approval of minutes, May 21st, 2019, special meeting. 7.5, 2018-19, additional budget appropriation. 7.6, 2018-19, additional transfer of funds. 7.7, acceptance of donation, Foothill Elementary. 7.8, acceptance of donation, Manhattan Middle School. 7.9, acceptance of donation, Meadowlark School. 7.10, acceptance of donation, Whittier Elementary. 7.11, amendment to the construction manager general contractor contract for bond-funded improvement work at the Education Center building. 7.12, approval to purchase elementary reading materials. 7.13, approval to purchase full-day kinder reading materials. 7.14, benefit stop-loss contract. 7.15, board resolution 1916 regarding notice of meetings for the Board of Education. 7.16, closeout to the construction manager general contractor contract for bond-funded work at Centennial Middle School. 7.17, intent to participate in the coordinated election on November 5th, 2019. 7.18, request for approval to adopt 612 performing arts learning materials. 7.19, grant, health and culture. Title VII, American Indian Education, U.S. Department of Education, 19. All right. So can I first get a motion to approve? So moved. By Kitty and seconded by Kathy. And would anyone like to pull any items? Nope. All righty. Any discussion about any of the items on the consent agenda? Richard?
I did have a couple of questions on the 7.19, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do an RFI on that.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, Laura, would you please call the roll?
Benford. Fuqua.
Yes.
Garcia.
Yes.
Gebhardt. Yes. Marquis.
Yep.
Myers.
Yes.
Sergeant.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, so our next item is policy study. So our board policy 9.1, board policy study for IGAE and IGAI are back on study, not on action, coming back as one policy this time. And Kathleen, you're going to stay there, right? All right.
If that's okay?
Yep.
So we had some fun with this policy following our last meeting where you had a lot of good questions and feedback. I also had an extensive meeting with Kyle Addington, who is the school district's director of health and culture, who was extremely helpful in just talking about how this policy looks to those who are implementing it, what our current practices as a district are, and ways that we could make this much easier to understand. Based on my discussions with Kyle, we brought back to you an integrated policy. I think it's important for the board to be aware that CASB's sample policy in this area is also one policy. There aren't two separate health education and then human sexuality education policies that are in the samples. And I do think that as I looked at them and thought about the really important obligations we have in terms of providing notice, where are there forms that we're required to provide to families that are going to excuse their children from instruction, it became clear that one policy would give us a better context in which to understand what the requirements are. So as you look at this red line version, the language that is red but is also in a bold font, that's intended to show you that that comes from an existing board policy. So it really came from IJAI the human sexuality education policy that we're then collapsing into this one. So that these are really, most of this is already language that the board had in policy that is now being amended to include definitions from state law, as we talked about last time. Those are the same, that are just pulled forward for you into this policy. And then we separated out the requirements. First, those that apply to any health education curriculum that's being delivered, and then the additional requirements that apply when we're looking at human sexuality education, so that we could try to be really, really clear and clean. There are a couple of items that now that we look at the additional requirements on page 4, that with Kyle's suggestion, I think we should maybe tweak the wording just a little bit. The one that I really want to point out is number 2, instruction shall be provided for every student grades, and we'd amended that to say 4th grade through 12th. It really, the board has always said it starts at 5th grade. That's what your existing policy says. That's what the existing practice is. So I don't want to make a big change by just inserting it into a policy revision. So my recommendation is, unless you have direction, we go back to what the board statements were about human sexuality education, that we're talking about grades 5th through 8th and then 10th through 12th. Those were the existing pieces. I know that for many of us, we had a lot of questions about what is it that you can excuse students from, and what can you not excuse students from? And the law here, I think, is just a little bit clunky because it has these legal provisions in different places. So on the last page of the red line, in addition to giving the legal citation, I also put in parentheses an explanation as to what that legal reference is. It is absolutely clear that when we're talking about human sexuality education, we have to provide 2 weeks' notice before that instruction begins. And the law also requires that we provide a form that would allow parents to decline or to excuse their child's participation. That's just black letter state law. The other provision that's important for the board to be aware of is the last legal citation in policy. It's Colorado Revised Statute 22-25-106 that says that districts must provide an exemption procedure based on religious beliefs and teachings of the student or the student's parent or guardian. That is not specific to human sexuality education. That applies to all health education. It, like I said, it sits in a different place in the law. We don't want to lose track of it. We want to make sure that we're giving our educators, our principals in particular, really clear guidance and references to where it comes from in the law. So that's, I think, a significant clarity that we can achieve with these revisions.
I have a couple questions. Are we ready for questions?
Absolutely, yes.
So on the bottom of page 2, in the definition of human sexuality instruction, it reads that a presentation by a school staff or non-school staff that teaches about abstinence or sexual activity. Can it be either or? Can they do it that way? Because part of the law said it has to include both. But I'm wondering if this is just going through a specific lesson, like you might have one lesson on abstinence and one lesson on sexual activity, and that's what that use of the word or is in that context.
You know, candidly, that's just straight from state law. That's straight from the new sex ed bill.
Okay.
But I see your point that it could perhaps read a little cleaner in that area, and I think that's an improvement that we could make and bring in the policy back to you.
Okay, and then the other question I had, I think would relate to what the form might look like, because my understanding is that we'll provide in writing what we're going to go over in the sexual health curriculum, and it reads that you can opt out of all or portions of, and I just want parents and teachers, I want there to be some clarity around if there's a fire drill on Tuesday, and Tuesday's when they were gonna do, I don't know, like condoms, and they didn't get around it, so they're gonna do it on Wednesday, what's the responsibility of the teacher if the parent had opted out of the condom portion? And and I don't want anyone to be overburdened or overtaxed, so if there's a way that the form can say, we're gonna try to get it in this range, but it gives people leeway, does that make sense? Because I don't want to get complaints on either side and have expectations not be able to be met.
Right. My understanding, and from my conversations with Kyle, there are some working versions of the forms that our intent is to really sit down and focus in on those once we've gotten to a place where the board is comfortable with the policy.
Okay.
The way that form sits in draft, at least, there's a box to be filled out on the form where the parents need to be specific about the topic or the content that they're excusing their students from. So it would be lessons on specific content or topic areas. Part of the notice requirement is that parents get an overview of what those topics are. So with the understanding they'd be putting that subject matter for their excusal form as opposed to a date. It does put responsibility on instructional staff to be aware as to what topics are going to be covered and students that need to be excused during those topics.
Right, and then will the form include a big disclaimer about the student question piece?
I think it will have to, and I do think that that's a clarification that comes out of the new sex ed bill that the legislature passed this year that's going to be important for educators and for families to understand.
Right,
So we can make sure that we get that on the
Okay.
form.
And then it would be good, just I think at some point, to also understand if, because the idea of, or the new sexual legislation includes, transgender relationships and homosexual relationships, to clarify whether those are topics or whether that's just an expansion that could happen at any moment during the sexual health portion. Just to, again, so if a parent says, I just want to opt out of anything to do with homosexuals, is that something we're going to be able to do?
Right, and I think that's a really important clarification, something that Kyle and I spent a great deal of time on, and I think aligns with the strategic plan when we talk about really identifying the topics that will be addressed as part of health education and then sexual health education, making sure that we don't go beyond what those topics are that are specific to these particular units of instruction. We know that in addressing each and every area that we cover, including civics and history, we need to be talking about the contributions of all different parts of people and humanity. And so each time that we mention the word transgender certainly doesn't make it a human sexuality instruction.
Right, and,
Yeah.
but we're not going to put that language in here, correct? That it's implied that the teaching about transgender is not a sexual health topic. That's implied in this language.
That's correct.
Correct, okay. Kathy? Oh, no. Who wants to go next?
Just a couple of clarifications. On page 3, the number 2, where you crossed out at least 2 weeks, help me understand, then it's back down, then you put number 6 in the red. How's that going to, why was one crossed out and then it's added? Maybe I'm just reading it wrong.
Well, I think that in the previous red line that I brought forward, it was pretty hard to keep track of what the notice requirements were that were specific to sexual health as opposed to overall health education. The overall health education, we need to give families an understanding of the topics that are going to be covered, but because sexual health is typically treated as this separate instructional unit, that is the unit to which state law attaches the 2-week notice requirement.
Okay, that clarifies that. And then the, where we put 4 through 8, 4 through 8, and then 10 through 12, what happens to 9?
I think that's an excellent question. the board's policy previously said 5th to 8th grade and then 10th to 12th. I'm not sure what happens with 9th graders. But that's certainly a question that I could get answered before we bring this policy back for action. I know my own 9th grader did a lot of human sexuality in her biology class in a different district. So I don't know exactly why we left out 9th graders in Boulder. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question. Can we accommodate this through our online health classes? Opt-outs of portions?
If it is a health education class, then we will need to find a way to honor the ability under state law for parents to excuse children from portions of it.
I think a lot of kids take online health.
I think you're right.
And just so that we know we can mute a section or. All right.
And I might add to this, not just online, but some health topics are covered in the special ed high school classrooms, and there's pretty graphic demos that happen. And so will that be covered as well? It's not necessarily called a health class, but there is a whole unit on sexuality, and so that's a question. It's not necessarily called health.
Right, and I do think that if what we're talking about is instruction that's part of this comprehensive health curriculum, we'll need to make sure that this policy is understood to apply to it.
Did have the same question about 9th grade, so thanks for getting back to us on that, because I think high school is a very different milieu, and there's some stuff I might want my kid to learn in 9th grade rather than wait till 10th. It's just what I was thinking of it. But to come back to what Tina was asking, so under what circumstances could a parent opt out their child from learning about being transgendered? Or could they never do that, never opt them out? Or do we not know the answer to that question?
I mean, I think I know the answer to that question. I'm not sure that we put, we don't identify people as the content in our human sexuality education, right? Transgender is a term that is used throughout our state law in many different areas of the curriculum, including the example we also have from this legislative session, that we need to make sure that we're addressing in our civics classes, the contributions of humans who happen to be transgender. When I looked through our materials with Kyle Addington, and we looked at the different list of topics that could be covered in health education, or the detailed list of topics we have to provide for sex ed, those lists went beyond those topics that are included in the state law definitions of health education. And I think that those topic lists themselves created some ambiguity or uncertainty about whether or not it was a section that could be opted out of. The state law is clear that the families can excuse their children. I don't want to overuse opt-out. Parents can excuse children from any and all parts of health education. That's a state law right. They can't exempt their kids from every civics lesson that may address the contributions of a person that's transgender. That right doesn't exist anywhere. I don't think we create that right by having ambiguous policies. I think we have to be clean and clear and aligned from the policy all the way down to the information that goes to families, so that we're really clear that just talking about a person doesn't mean that we've now stepped into a unit on sex ed. So I know I'm not giving you a great answer. We could have a specific paragraph in this policy that says every time we talk about someone who is transgender or LGBTQ, we're not taught, it doesn't mean that we're in the realm of sex ed. And I struggled with that language,
Health
frankly.
education is what I.
Right.
Yeah.
But what about the law that you cited about the exemption procedure based on religious belief? So would that be the exception to the exemption?
It is an overall ability to excuse students from comprehensive health education that conflicts with a family's religious
But
beliefs.
that law that you cited is only for health education. So there's not a law that's just about you can be exempt from anything, of evolution, for instance, if that's against your religious belief.
Right, those are not the laws that we're talking about tonight. So the policy, the specific legal requirement
Is there a law that says that?
Well, we have a federal constitution that presents issues around religion, right? And requires us to make accommodations on the basis of religion.
But we don't have a local statute that addresses.
We don't have a specific statute that says parents can opt out of any part of public education that they don't like. No, we don't.
I mean, they can homeschool, but.
Correct.
Right.
We have specific state rights that have been created, and what we're trying to do in this policy revision is make sure that we are really explicit about what we're talking about, so that it doesn't, we don't get stuck in trying to create new definitions. Comprehensive health education is defined in state law. We know what it means. And we're gonna apply these requirements, because we must, the way they're written in state law. So 22-25-1064 is a specific ability to excuse children from instruction that conflicts with parents' beliefs, and it is under state law that applies to local comprehensive health education programs. It is specific.
You may want to put that in the little summary of that state law, because one could almost interpret it as being an umbrella for all religious beliefs, regardless of the material being addressed in the classroom.
Right.
And I wouldn't want it to be interpreted as the district somehow necessarily endorsing that.
Right. Other comments and questions about our new combined policy, Kitty?
Well, this is probably going to end up being an RFI, but do we have any idea how many kids are opted out of any particular piece of health education? I mean, I don't think you know it, Kathleen. I'm just.
Right.
Because that would just be interesting to know, is like how many kids is this? Hmm?
All right, what else? Well, that's, I think it could be in the RFI, that's what they're wondering, yeah. All right, what other reactions to our new combined? And by the way, anytime we can go from 2 to 1, we're ahead of the game. So
One
thank
less
you.
policy to keep
One
updated.
less policy to
yes.
keep updated, one less policy for new board members to read.
I just have a comment and maybe a question at the same time. Is it, I don't know what the materials are in terms of what we're talking about, but is it possible for individual board members to look at that particular material, or how can you accommodate that? I mean, so I can.
Yes, it certainly is possible. And one of the requirements of state law and that's contemplated in these specific provisions is that we do have those materials available for review by our public, including our esteemed board, and that occasionally, as directed, that we have public forums about those materials.
Other questions or comments? All right, well, oh, yeah, okay.
I just want to thank you, Kathleen. I feel as if the clearer these policies are and the more they clearly comply with law, the better off we are when we face any situation. And so I thank you very much for doing the research you have done and for making this very clear. Thanks.
All right, great. Well, school might be over, but we're going to keep going on big topics. Let's go into study item 10.1, 2019-20 proposed budget. Is everyone's doing okay? No one needs a break? All good, okay. Oh my gosh.
I was just looking up what year I think I started presenting budgets in this room, which was 15 years ago, apparently. So as we wind up our last budget presentation in this wonderful room, you know, it's somewhat emotional that we will be
Wow.
moving on to new digs.
Jeez.
So we just wanted to put that out there that we will have new digs, interim digs for a while, but then new digs that will be presenting budgets for years to come. So the 2019-2020 proposed budget. So a few topics to run through here. This is largely repetitive from the preliminary budget review that we did back on April 9th. The few changes will be noted as we go through there. So we'll go through the timeline, the input to budget development, the proposed budget itself, and then next steps moving forward. So next slide. So here's our budget development milestones. The red line indicating where we are, slightly further to the right than last time we met. So again, still a few bits of information that could come along, but largely wrapped up at this point in time. Next slide is the stakeholder input groups that were met with multiple times to gather input on budget development and targeting of resources towards particular initiatives or activities. I won't read through all of these, but needless to say, it has been a many months process of pulling together all these different ideas into the proposed budget. Next slide. So these are the priorities that were adopted by the board for 2018-19. We did not go through the process of adopting new priorities for the board. I think as we move into finalizing the strategic plan going forward, the idea would really become pulling those together, that the strategic plan is the budget priorities. So this I just wanted to put out there. The items that are included in here are very consistent with what was heard through those other stakeholder groups. Next slide. We have the prioritization of topics from the Board of Education, and these will show up as we go forward. These were work sessions that we had discussing these various topics and financial implications related to them. Next slide. So these next couple of slides, I'll run through some highlights on revenues and expenditures. So at 2.7% inflation, that's the consumer price index, which is the per pupil funding increase, $352 net increase per pupil funding. The budget stabilization factor was improved or reduced by $100 million statewide. There's still $572 million remaining in that, shall we say, debt to school districts. The $100 million translates into about $3.5 million for BVSD, and we have about $19.2 million remaining in that debt to Boulder Valley. Funding for full-day kindergarten, after many years of discussion and attempts at including it in the School Finance Act, it was fulfilled this year, and then we have a no enrollment change projected for next year. Next slide. This is on the expenditure side. The compensation package, 2.7% cost of living adjustment, contractual salary schedule movements, 5% health and dental increase, and a 0.25% rate increase in PERA. That's the rate that the district pays. There will also be a rate increase on the portion that employees pay, and this will go up over the next couple of years. Implementation of high school start times, implementation of full-day kindergarten, phase 3 of the elementary counselor rollout, 2 additional special education intensive learning center classrooms, and 3.5 additional FTE of special ed elementary teachers. Next slide, one-time expenses. So these, again, will be included in the budget but are not reoccurring. They will occur for next year only at this point in time. $3.5 million staffing reserve, that's to address a multitude of issues from enrollment coming in not as projected either in a particular school or overall, as well as some appears to be never-ending discussions of what funding will come through in federal grants. But it's a place that we can go to address those staffing hotspots within the district. CTE programming expansion, English language arts materials for secondary schools, $1.3 million. A dyslexia screener pilot at the kindergarten level. The one-time costs associated with kindergarten PD and classroom setup, and then a continuation of a custodial sub-temp staffing program that we had in place this year. So for the proposed budget, I'll just run through a couple of slides with the summary of changes since we last spoke, and then other funds, and then next steps. Next slide. So on the resource side, so we have included, and this is a change in practice from the past, some carryover requests that we know were included in the budget in this current year, would not be expended, but would be some of it would be spent in the beginning of this next fiscal year because it's professional development or some sort of expense that would hit in the first few months of the year before we would get into the revised budget process. So it's just an attempt to put the dollars out there and give the departments those resources up front. So that's $700,000 associated with that. And then on the revenue side, the charter central services, so when charter schools pay for services from the district, that's a revenue side, so we adjusted some of that. And then there was that last minute change in the budget stabilization factor when it went from 77 million overall to 100 million. That little additional bit of revenue we built in as well, and recognizing that going forward. On the next slide, whoop. We jumped forward too far. There we go. On the expenditure side, the non-personnel, so this is where those department carryover requests show up. No change in the compensation. In the transfers, so this is the charter fund, so we transferred the additional resources for the budget stabilization factor change in full-day kindergarten to the charter schools. And then reserves is where the largest change happens. So when we build the budget initially and project where we're going to be, we assume that the reserves that are in the budget currently carry forward in their entirety. A lot of those reserves are in place for one-time expenditures that are in the current year budget. Those either will be carried over or they've been spent out and will the reserve on it will not be needed. So it's kind of a timing of how much is needed. And so while there's less identified in reserves than what we were talking about in the preliminary budget process, some portion of that will be needed in the revised budget on a one-time basis.
to fund those reserves for things that are currently in the budget and will continue forward into this next year. So the ending balance overall is up by 1.6 million, largely one-time resources and largely due to that reserve conversation. Next slide. The other funds, these are all the same from what we discussed back in April. So the Operations and Technology Fund, we have that expenditure transfer from the General Operating Fund and the continuation of the $4 million project for the ERP implementation. Community schools, the closing of the KE program, and a little bit of one-time expense for the next 2 years around space rental as they have relocated off-site from this facility that will be bulldozed in a couple of months. And then the Risk Management Fund, property and liability insurance rate increase. And next steps. So before, last time we spoke, we had the pending legislative impacts. Now they're pending impacts of the legislative decisions. So the READ Act, as I think the details get worked out on exactly how that will be changed in the allocation. The debrucing question that will come forward on the ballot. Again, unlikely to produce any resources, but something that's out there. And then certainly the final results of the full-day kindergarten rollout, how many families actually do participate, and are there any anomalies in projections around participation at 100%, which is really what we're planned on, but only staffing to the extent that students are enrolled. We're not overstaffing, but that certainly will be discovered as we get into the fall. So then next meeting is the budget adoption, and then in September is when we really start dialing in what the current year ending balances are, those carryover requests, and any other one-time resources that are available. In November, certainly our October count is finalized. It takes about a month between the October 1 count date and the finalization in early November when the data is submitted. In December, we'll have the certification of mill levies, our standard process for that, where we will see the impacts of the assessed valuation in the community. I think folks have seen some of the tax bills starting to come out, and there are some significant changes in some areas of Boulder County, and so how that is overall impacts both the local revenue collection as well as our Operations and Technology Fund, which is based on a fixed mill. And then certainly in January, we'll have our revised budget adoption. That is the end.
All right. Thank you so much. We ready to ask questions? Okay. Board members, do you have questions? Kathy, then Richard?
Did we apply for the full-day K implementation money, and do you know how much it is?
We will, not yet. We have not applied yet. We don't know exactly how much it'll be yet.
Do you have a ballpark?
What's it,
I'm just curious, because there's full-day implementation costs in here, and I think that's supposed to help cover some of that.
These costs are largely PD.
It also said classroom setup, that's why I asked the question.
There is some in there for classroom setup, but the bond was identified for a portion of the classroom setup, so it might free up some bond resources. But in talking to CDE, it looks like somewhere between $500,000 to $700,000.
And then I just have a question. I know this is off of budget priorities, and it's wordsmithing. But I'm wondering if we couldn't add in the words mental health it's on slide 5 where it says social emotional learning and supports, if we could, because counselors are helping with mental health. And in the framing of what we're doing, I just thought if we could add in mental health supports in front of the word supports.
So this is the exact language
I
that
know
was
that's the
adopted by the
problem.
board last year, which in theory it should all go away as the strategic plan moves forward.
Okay, so it's temporary. It's just, it's interesting, because we were all about social emotional learning 2 years ago, and now it's kind of morphed into mental health. And it just seems like it's more reflective of what we were thinking, so, but I figured that you were gonna tell me it was something we couldn't change.
At that point in time, I think it was heavily focused on the elementary counselors.
Right, which to me, seems to be mental health as well.
I think the counselors is a specific initiative, though, so I would see social emotional plus mental health. Like,
that's why I said,
yeah, I would like a whole other monetary investment into that,
which I don't see coming.
which I don't see coming. Richard,
Just a couple of questions, Bill. When will you know about kindergarten enrollment? In the fall, you said?
We certainly have some indications now, and then as folks get accustomed to the idea that it's available and start to make that choice, if folks that have enrolled in private full-day kindergarten undo that and make the choice to come back. So, I mean, really, we'll start to know August, I would say.
Because there's still the option for parents to keep their kids in half-day kindergarten.
Well, somewhat semantics. There is no half-day kindergarten program. Parents are more than welcome to take their student home halfway through the day.
Okay. Okay, yeah, my reason for asking the question is if that option was available, then we're phasing out completely the kindergarten enrichment program.
Correct.
So it's gone. Okay. So if, well, forget it. The other question that I had is, I think I seem to recall at one of the budget presentations that you made some time back that there was like about $400,000 still left over on one-time spending. Do anybody remember? Is that?
There was and there still is resources available.
Okay. And when are we going to decide on what to do with that? I guess, let me get to what I want to see, okay?
Fair enough.
I know that in the past, we've always talked about setting some dollars aside to help fund some of the community partnerships that we have out in the community, but we've never gone past that little piece of conversation. I want to know if we're ever going to get serious about this, because it seems to me like that would be probably a good place maybe think about that, especially looking at the strategic planning that we're looking in terms of some of the initiatives.
so I think in the last prioritization, we did the stickers on that, and we decided not to move forward with that conversation. Now, that doesn't mean we can't talk about it again, because we have all the flexibility we want, but I think.
No, and I understand that, but
So I
then we
just
didn't
wanted
know
to-
of the strategic plan in terms of what some of those particular initiatives are going to be, and since we know that coming.
My recommendation to the board on dollars that are still left, whether it's one time or it's ongoing, is to give our action teams the ability, our strategic initiative action teams, the ability to begin to develop their action planning. Some of those things may need resources, and so while I can't tell you what those dollars are today, as we move forward into next semester, we would be able to know where those dollars could be allocated, and we could come back to you with a budget request at that point in time. Additionally, we are, right now, this budget is based on 0% declining enrollment, right? And so if the enrollment doesn't come in as projected, the last thing that we want to be able to have to do is start to say, okay, what do we want to stop doing to be able to balance the budget? You'd want to have a little bit of funds there where you'd have some flexibility. So my recommendation would be, even if, you know, we haven't totally zeroed out where we're at, that we wait until until next semester to see kind of where the enrollment plays out in October, and then also let our action teams do their team, so we do their work, so we can understand if those are dollars that can be invested into those strategic initiatives that you learned about tonight.
And so, Rob, you proposed setting aside some money anyway to help with any bubbling issues about class size. And so what you're talking about now isn't necessarily that, but could be?
I think that we've set aside, considering we've set aside an extra $1 million from the previous year. So we're at a staffing reserve at $3.5 million, right? And as we've discussed, would allow us to, if our formulas don't hold up, and we have areas where, you know, as Bill said, staffing hotspots, to be able to make sure that we maintain what we want, we'll be able to do that. What I'm speaking to is, I don't know that at this point in the budget process, putting any new expenditures or ideas on the table. I think that we wait to let our action teams do their work around strategic initiatives, and let's see where our student enrollment plays out. And having a little bit of cushion in there, I'm very comfortable with, and I think it sets us up for success next semester.
100 students is $1 million, which is very small percent change, but that would be a loss of $1 million to have to address that we'll know more about in the next few months.
Anyone else? Board members, comments? Well, so this is going to be on our next agenda to vote on, June 11th.
Consent?
Consent, can we put this on consent, or do you all want to have another discussion?
Consent works for me.
Okay, let's put it on consent. And we can always poll it, there we go. All right, so now we'll go on to agenda setting. And this is an opportunity to add things to the agenda. We just had our prioritization with Heather last week, and I think she sent out the results to the board, is that right? Maybe not. Okay. You did, okay. I don't know, I guess I didn't get, agenda items, couple RFIs coming in,
I
yeah.
have a quick one. I'd like to see if in August we could get a presentation on the debrucing and whether the board wants to take a position on supporting the debrucing. That's going to be on the ballot in November.
Okay, ballot issue, all right.
Or September. I mean, the timing I leave up to staff, but it seems like we might want to have a position on that.
Okay. Anything else?
I just want to know, because tonight we were scheduled to hear from the community around budgets, and had community members come to the board to talk about budgets, and they would have brought up some things around budget, and we have money left over, would have considered that? I guess I'm a little bit confused in terms of why do we have community budget hearing, and if people come and they want to see something included in the budget, but, you know, how does that work?
And I'll just give you my perspective. That's part of a transparency to talk about the formulation of the budget, the accountability, teacher pay, contracts. I don't view it as a wish list opportunity, but it's something that, it's another piece of feedback we can take as we make up our priorities. But it doesn't mean we would, I don't view it as specifically saying, if one person comes here and asks for money, that's our job is to fulfill that specific request. I use it as a data input, but I don't know what other board members, Sam?
Yeah, and I think that it's not the only public opportunity to weigh in on the budget. Certainly, we have checkpoints earlier in the process. But like Tina, I think if someone had shown up tonight to say you have an extra $400,000, here's how I think you should spend it, I don't think I would be able to agree to that in the moment. Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just asking if we're going to have community budget hearings and stuff like that. I think we need to be clear in terms of what we're asking community come and input on. If they're going to come and just input in terms of our transparency on how things work, then we ought to call it like that.
I would say, Board, if you recall, early on in our budget process, we listed for you all of the groups and communities, and we did have a public forum open to anybody who wanted to attend to talk to us about what the budget priorities should be. And then we provided you a matrix that shared with you how those things aligned to the investments that we recommended. And so Richard, to your point, if somebody really wants to kind of put, I would say my position would be, if you have an opinion on where the district should spend dollars, early on in the process is the time to do that. When you get to this point in the process, I think it's really tough. We're a week away from approving the budget. Most of the public is, it's school's out. I think it's really tough at the end. That's why I think that we were trying to be really thoughtful in engaging those additional groups, and at your request had a public budget input workshop. So I would say that we can certainly work towards, advertising that. We had more people that showed up to that than showed up today to speak to the budget.
Yeah, we have budget workshops and stuff like that, but the community's not allowed to come and speak about budget workshops. I'm just wondering, when are they gonna have time to come and do that? And let me tell you, I guess I'm just getting a little bit frustrated because, yeah, we put bubbles and stuff like that, or stickers or whatever they are. But when you're only one person putting stickers on that crazy thing, I mean, it's not gonna do any good. I guess I'm just.
Well, and another option would be to put the public budget here. I mean, it's tricky because this is when the budget's done, and we can't get the budget totally complete until about 4 weeks ago, when the legislature signs off. But we could, and we also have DAC, which works with the SACs, which works with all the parents, so there is voice in that channel. But we could have our community budget a little bit earlier as more of an input, rather than this is what we did, if you have feedback on the end product. I mean, I don't know if we've talked about that.
That's what I was referring to. We actually did have a session where we talked to people, where we had an open session where people were able to come and speak and provide their opinions and thoughts at the request of the board. We did hold that session.
And what month was that? Remind me.
2-3 months
All right,
ago.
well, fair enough. So that was, okay. Yeah, Shelley?
I hear Richard's point. I think that, what if you miss the meeting and you still think something's really important to include? I feel like not everyone's tracking those meetings here. So when you get somebody coming here tonight and saying, I really, I've been talking to you guys about this for years and I'm still talking to you about it. Like, how does that get included? Because arguably it could fit into many of your strategic initiatives. Any one of these requests could fit. So how does like a smaller request get included, I guess, if somebody misses it at the very beginning?
I'd have to ask Bill, and we can get back to you and answer this, and certainly this is a worthy conversation. I want to say that we allowed people to email us thoughts or ideas.
Well, and also coming to public participation. I mean, that's part of the budget. I mean, we all are here listening. It doesn't need to be a budget meeting.
I'm sensitive to the point that you're making. We want to be inclusive, certainly want to be inclusive. If people have opinions and thoughts, we want to hear those, right? That's, this board is all about that, right? Listening to our community. I think from a functionality standpoint, today, if we want to do something more, a push, I think it just needs to be earlier in the process to give us the abilities to adjust and think. So certainly great feedback we can consider. But Richard, I appreciate your point. Shelley, I appreciate your point. And of course, we want to listen.
Okay. Other comments? Do you want to put that as an RFI to talk about this, Richard? Do you want to, I mean, not RFI, but on the agenda planning? Yeah. Okay. Anything else? All right, well, let's adjourn our meeting then.